If you're tuning in after the stream, I would advise skipping forward 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'm going to give a little bit of time for some folks to get in here, and then we will start our reaction to the Rational Male Returns with Rollo Tomassi and Zuby. So, just going to give a few more minutes and see if we get some folks in here. Yo, Klaus, welcome in, man. Shout out to you, man. You are kicking the stream off. Appreciate you coming in. And I saw those messages you put in the Discord with the article about the home prices. So I am going to go through those and reply to them. But that was really interesting what you described in there about how people trying to control like the rent caps and everything had all these downstream effects on the housing market that were pretty terrible. So that was very eye-opening. I also hope you're doing well, man. I just been out flying my drone today and putting some oil in my car. A lot of the usual stuff. Just gonna give it a couple more minutes, see if any of the other folks come in. If not, we'll just go ahead and watch this together. But I'm hoping this conversation will be pretty good. It's a little long, so I might skip through some parts of it if it tends to just keep dragging. But hopefully it won't be so bad. It didn't get too many views. About 4,000 views. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with it, though. I hope things are good out there for you in Germany. I was just reading a little bit about Nietzsche and his background and stuff, and so that reminded me of you a little bit. All right. Sometimes I think about getting one of those screens where it has a countdown for the stream, but I don't know why. I've never liked or cared for those things for some reason. It just feels kind of weird. Maybe if I had like a lot bigger community, it would make sense, but not right now. I also bought his other book. I have his book Rational Male, but he wrote one on religion, which I never read, but I did decide to buy that to see what he has to say about it. We'll probably get some of that in the interview today. Give another minute, and then we'll just get started. I don't feel like waiting for too long.
You want to talk about?
All right, that's working. Hell yeah. All right, I say we just start reacting to it. I'm just gonna start watching it. It's a long one. It's like 2 hours.
You want to talk?
But again, I might skip through some of this if it just keeps going and going, and tends to be the same thing. There's some sections here. There's defining red pill in today's terminology, advice in the internet age, gynocentrism. That should be interesting. Gender differences, gender neutralizing language. That's probably things like partner and these new terms you hear. Casting as sexist. Depth of education amongst left and right and left. Marriage. If this stuff is not that interesting, I'll probably just skip it straight over to marriage. Generational differences. So I don't think this discussion will be very contentious between them. I think it'll be pretty Pretty normal, but let's go ahead and just listen.
About a religion. Emotionalism is the religion.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Today, I am back in the hot seat in Las Vegas. We have got on a returning guest. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. He is the OG of what is now known as the Red Pill. This is Mr. Rational Male himself, Rollo Tomassi.
Hey.
Welcome back to the
Good
podcast.
to be back. I think I was one of your first guests. Like when you first started the podcast, I think when was it? Like 2018?
It was
when did you start?
4 years ago.
Yeah. So 2019?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think late 2019
You
or
were just
early
getting off the
2020.
ground. Yeah. And then the last time I did a show with you was on Fresh and Fit
Yes.
in
That was
August
also a while
of
ago.
2021. Yeah.
Yeah, that was also a while ago. So first things first, man. How you been doing? How are
I've
you?
been doing real good. I have been very, very busy. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think in the last 4 years, what have I been doing? In the last 4 years, I've produced 2 more books. So I have my 4th and my 5th book out right now. I'm obviously the author of The Rational Male. So I've been I'm more or less, I had the guy that your tech hero was asking me like, what do you do? And I'm like, God, that's a really tough question. I'm a podcast host. I'm also the co-host of a new show that I put together with my partner, my business partner, Mike Sartain, here in Las Vegas. And I've recently sort of relocated semi-permanently to the Las Vegas area so I can be closer to what I need to be doing down here. Which is taking up a lot of my time. So I spread myself pretty thin these days. So I'm working on books. I'm working on podcast shows. I'll go on interviews. And I was just on Tim Pool not too long ago. About a year and a half ago, I was on Dr. Phil. So I'll get...
Yo, Caesar, welcome in, man. I gotta really move my shout out sound effect from right next to the fail button. That's dangerous. But welcome in, man. You and Klaus are providing me company tonight, so I appreciate both of y'all. And yo, JP, welcome in, man. Big shout out to you also. Appreciate seeing you guys. Now we got a party going, so I just figured I'd listen to this one. I don't know exactly, how good this will be. I haven't watched it, but I think this might contrast the stuff we watched the other day with Doug Wilson and the TradCon guy. Yo, Caesar, man, you are funding this channel and carrying that on your back. So I do appreciate that, man, honestly. Very generous. Very, very generous. Also, I flew my drone today, and I did think of you because I know you got the Mavic 3 Pro. And I was like, man, that must be amazing. But yeah, I had a good time. And then my neighbors, because I was flying it around just outside the front of my house, and my little app, the Aloft app, which you're supposed to use, says it's fine, but a couple of my neighbors, they know me pretty good. They came by and they're like, who's flying the drone? And then when they saw it was me, they were like, oh, that's cool. But it got me a little worried because I'm like, maybe I'm lucky it was those guys today, but maybe it really is, annoying people. I swear I wasn't spying on people. I was just up like 350 feet taking pictures of random things from afar. But I did have fun.
I'll get pulled, I got a lot of irons in the fire and I get pulled this way and that. And so I think it's more like I play whack-a-mole quite a bit and I'm very good.
Christian Hernandez says, oh no, not this LARPer. Any chance you can talk to TFM? Gosh, I'm not sure who TFM is. I don't know why. Shout out to you though. Thanks for coming in. And Arthur Dunn. Shah, what up, bro? What's going on, man? Glad to see you guys in here. I don't know who TFM is. I swear, as soon as you put in the name, I'm probably gonna recognize it. But I wouldn't mind, or maybe checking out some of his content if he's a bigger creator or something.
Good at it now, so.
In today's fast-paced world, it's getting harder to live a healthy lifestyle. So many people are struggling with gut issues, stress, inflammation, fatigue, and immune health issues. With hectic schedules, processed food, cellular seems to have gone the concept of mainstream, and I would
Turd Flinging Monkey. Okay, that name does sound familiar. I can't say I've ever listened to his stuff, but I've seen him somewhere. Old MGTOW guy. I mean, check out his debates on playing with fire. I'll check him out and look at his work. Let me just, I'll just write that, put that to a new tab. I mean, I wouldn't mind. Especially as a MGTOW guy. I'm very curious to hear their perspective. I was just watching some stuff on you know, Andrew Tate, and there's a lot kind of coming out there, and he's got new charges, and it just makes me kind of appreciate the folks that have been in the space a lot longer that haven't been mired in all this kind of BS and sort of tarnished the whole thing, you know. And it would be interesting to hear what they got to say, especially about how the space has evolved as time has gone on. Turd flinging monkey. It's a funny name.
Say in a rather distorted fashion. So when I'm online, particularly on X, the app formerly known.
One thing I remember, I'm pretty sure, I think Rollo came on his show after the TradCon Red Pill Twitter war that happened last fall. So we're almost a year out from when that happened. And I remember listening to that. I don't remember much of it, but I wonder what, you know, if there's going to be any real difference or anything in this conversation that's significant about that.
It's Twitter,
Twix.
and even
Twix, that's what we call it.
yeah, but yeah, on YouTube, on Instagram, on even in some everyday conversations, I hear this term of red pill more, and I've even had people on podcasts be like, "All right, Zuby, what is the red pill? Can you explain this to me?" And you really, I mean, we've got to give credit to you as the person who coined the term as it is used as it pertains to gender dynamics. Obviously, it's a Matrix reference, which goes back 20 plus years ago. But for those who are listening, whether they've heard of it or they haven't, or they have misconceptions or they think they know what it is, what is the red pill?
This is probably stuff we've heard before, but you know, I think he's gonna go into the Chilton Manual of Intrasexual Dynamics. Turd flinging monkey has to be one of the OGs besides Barbarossa and Stardust. Hey, I think it was you who told me about Barbarossa recently. There was a comment, and it was someone who watched my dowry video. It might have been you. I don't remember who left it, but they told me about Barbarossa, and I didn't know who that was, but I actually went and listened to some of his work, and it's really good. I mean, there was nothing he said in there that I disagreed with at all, and like his videos are like 12 years old too, which is crazy. I don't think he's really posted anything recently, but he was on top of it. So it's crazy to think 12 years ago the conversation was some quality, especially on YouTube, but then it became, you know, what it became today. Is one of the OGs besides Barbarossa and Stardust. They're definitely more on the intellectual side that no longer exists. You know, just fake PUAs and black manosphere guys. Yeah, I mean, you know, it got subsumed by the whole whatever and fresh and fit stuff. And I think part of that's also the format too. You know, it's like, I think those guys were around before like reels and shorts and like the real short attention span TikToks took off, you know, because that's what got like Andrew Tate up there, was that new format and this army of people making shorts constantly and posting clips and whatever. But these guys were there before that. And then, you know, the kind of bread and circus type formats just hit this huge wave during COVID, especially with this new format, and just completely drowned everybody else out. And then that's how they got attention. And then, you know, the TradCons came in to attack that. And then finally it like brought in the old MGTOW guys. And even I kind of refer to Rollo as a red pill purist, in the sense that he just wants to keep it to intrasexual dynamics, or, you know, however he's going to tell it to us literally once we hit play again. But yeah, I would love to hear the opinions of these guys, even someone like Barbarossa, or even like Paul Elam and the original men's rights guys, of what they see happening. And like, if I can ask him a question, I would want to ask him like positive and negative, like if they see anything positive and negative and all that. I'm going to write that down. The only reason I'm writing this down is because I might have an interview with someone else. Someone left me a comment and said that they know Stephen Baskerville, who we've reacted to before, and he's a PhD and studies family law. So, you know, if he's willing to talk to me, I might be able to record an interview with him and then post it on here for you guys. But I did want to think of questions. Are positive and negative attributes of the current manosphere. So if that happens, it'd be pretty freaking sweet. I'd love to be able to get an interview like that for you guys, but it would be a fun interview because I've worked in the system and he has spent years literally studying the legal changes. So there might be a kind of, synergy there between him and I. The conversation was much better than it is now. It's very degraded now. Yeah, and I didn't know who those guys were, but I graduated college in 2012, and I found the red pill shortly thereafter. So that was probably like 2013-ish, and I had just kind of followed the subreddit and read it, periodically throughout all those years, even before I started child support. And then I would read it even as I was at child support. I used to read it, and I was spending time just reading the field reports. I always thought they were interesting and the high-level theory and stuff. And there was a certain point on the subreddit where it grew a lot, and it just kind of became not good, And that was around the time, like, Jordan Peterson was kind of getting big, like, just after that. And then, Andrew Tate came. And it just got saturated and flooded. But I can imagine the same thing happened with these guys that were on, different corners of YouTube. I would hope we can revive some of that. At least try to bring that spirit back, And if there can be this kind of passing of the torch or connection between these older guys like Paul Elam that have spent years here, or even Stephen Baskerville or Peter Wright, who has gynocentrism.com, because they've seen this from like when no fault divorce was, the effects of that was new, and child support coming up and all these things, all the way through the literal creation of the manosphere as we know it. So there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge there. So hopefully we can get some of those blessings from them. Paul Elam is a great one too, one of the originals, especially his views on romantic chivalry. I literally just bought his book. I think someone in the last stream asked me if I read Chivalry. It's co-authored by Peter Wright and Paul Elam. So I just purchased the book. I think it was yesterday, along with Rollo's religion book, just because I want to see what he writes in there. And since the book is so old, it would be interesting to hear what his opinion is. My guess it's going to be something to do with gynocentrism in the church. But Paul and Peter's book is coming on Monday, so I'm gonna look forward to reading that. Guys, Thing wants me to play ads like every freaking minute, and I keep hitting skip ads because I just can't do that. RSD ruined the conversation because they were more interested in selling courses than the truth. The MGTOW guys broke it down in a multidisciplinary way: biology, psychology, philosophically. Yeah, that's what happened, and I don't want to call those guys grifters or anything. I mean, there's definitely a lot of grifters, but I remember when it started becoming overrun by that, and it took the focus off a lot of the more higher intellectual, like you said earlier, collective issues, and it really did get kind of subsumed by the sort of self-improvement pickup artist style guys. But I would consider that getting hijacked or at least derailed. I am trying to think about like what are positives of it. I mean, they did make it mainstream. Now, of course, we're taking a lot of flack, and all this Andrew Tate stuff is not helping because it just makes anybody associated with this look like they're, after young people or, just really on the extreme side like that. So it's done good and it's done bad.
Well, to me, what the red pill is intersexual dynamics, which is exactly what you were saying before.
There we go, intersexual dynamics.
I'll tell you a quick story.
Please do.
I was March of 2021, and I had just started getting involved with Fresh and Fit. And I think we were into our third show, and I was interviewed. I still have this clip today. I use this as an intro sometimes on my own show. But there's a clip where they asked me exactly the same question. They said, do you think that the red pill is going to go mainstream? And my answer to both of the guys was, I hope not. And there's a reason I said that, is because what happens is when it goes mainstream, people will take the red pill as a kind of a loose brand or a term. And if it seems like it's something cool that the kids are doing, then they'll call it red pill, right? Now that we're in an election cycle, really started kind of like about like June of last year, really. But an election cycle is really 18 months now. It's not just a year. So Right around June of the year prior to an election cycle, that's when you see everyone pivoting towards like social issues and political issues. And what happens during those times is as people, especially traditional conservatives, want to pick up whatever is hot and whatever is trending at that time. And we saw the same thing happen back in 2015, 2016. So, for instance, if you go back to Twitter, Twix, whatever, around that time, and you look up Candace Owens' Twitter account, she used to call herself Red Pill Black. So what's Red Pill, right? Back then, people want to say, well, it's the alt-right. Or, well, it's a political thing. It's just seeing the truth for what it really is. And what happens is when it becomes ambiguous like that, and it's not like clearly, distinctly defined as intersexual dynamics, people take the red pill to be whatever their pet ideology happens to be. So if it's conservatism, that's the red pill. If it's I'm anti-feminism, that's the red pill. If it's vote for Trump, that's the red pill. MAGA, that's the red pill. Alt-right, that's the red pill. It's not the red pill. The red pill to me, anyways, has been and always will be about intersexual dynamics. So,
the interesting thing about Rollo and what he's saying there about it being a Chilton manual, just about the intersexual dynamics. I hear what he's saying, and I don't think he's wrong. And I know that to be true in the sense of there's a channel called Red Pill University, and he interviewed someone named Whisper. And back when the Red Pill subreddit was new, Whisper was like one of the main guys on there, and he would put really good posts on there, even some about like tradcons and how that's pretty much blue pill, just a lot of things that were really, really interesting. But they asked him how the subreddit started, and he said that there were guys that were on the seduction subreddit, and they were trying to figure these things out. But every time they would get close or kind of bump into a moral boundary, the moderators would, ban them or something like that. So they created the Red Pill subreddit, and the whole point of it literally was the mod style, in the sense of we were going to try to figure out what created attraction or diminished it. Kind of going off of seduction, the subreddit. But if someone said something that was kind of immoral, you know what I mean? They wouldn't ban that. But if someone tried to inject morality into the conversation, that was not allowed there. So by modding it in that way, it allowed a space to have this conversation, to truly figure out what intersexual dynamics really was. And it wasn't that it was immoral, it's that it was amoral. It's just we had to divorce morality from seduction, which they couldn't do on the other subreddit. The part where, like, if I had to challenge him a little bit on the red pill is just the Chilton manual, comes from sort of what the tradcons accused the red pillars of. They'll say their main gripe is that the red pill is promoting degeneracy. So, Myron's had us at this point famous sleep with 50 women before you get married, and the tradcons have a host of criticisms about that. Then he also, he said these things like Jesus can't save these hoes, all this stuff that got them riled up. And so they came with these accusations at Red Pill, and then you hear Rollo step in to basically say, no, Red Pill is just intersexual dynamics, and that these other prescription models like that Fresh and Fit put on there, or whoever puts on there, are just things that are built on top of Red Pill, intersexual dynamic talking points or whatever, right? My only challenge to that, and the reason that that's being explained too, is to explain what it is, but it's also to kind of navigate this accusation of promoting degeneracy, because they'll say, Rollo, you recommend spinning plates. But then he'll say, that doesn't mean I'm saying sleep with those women. I'm saying you should have an abundance mentality and exercise options. And he has an explanation for that. If I had to challenge him on that, I would say it goes into the metaphor of the red pill. And the red pill, in a sense, necessarily, if you choose the red pill, you are rejecting the blue pill. And the blue pill is essentially the forms of morality we have, whether it's the tradcon moral system or it's the progressive liberal moral system on the other side. So you do sort of reject those moral systems, I guess you could say, as true in favor of what the red pill is, even though the red pill is technically amoral. So in a sense, there is this this run up and this conflict with the moral value systems we have, and saying red pill is just this intersexual dynamic Chilton Manual thing may not, come to terms with the fact that there is this kind of bump up with morality and even almost a rejection of it in favor of being amoral, so not that what he's saying is wrong. I just think there's an interesting context there. When it goes mainstream, people won't give me credit that I stole and kissed my ring, so it would be bad. Well, I think that's kind of one of the things that sort of happened. It started going mainstream, and Rollo and these guys who did put a lot of work into this stuff for years, on the forums, are seeing this terminology being used, and they want to be part of it. You know what I mean? And that kind of makes them work with these people like Fresh and Fit and these other creators who are younger and kind of coming up, in this kind of bread and circus field. And now at this point, the balloon's kind of popped on that side, and he's kind of having to deal with a lot of blowback from being associated with a lot of that stuff and those kind of people. Oh, good point. Christian, most of the mainstream red pillars became totally cucked by tradcons because they haven't read Nietzsche. You know what's so crazy? And I was just reading this I was looking at this because I brought it up on Thursday, and I was trying to reread some of it and refamiliarize myself with his talking points. But here's the thing. I graduated in 2012, and I used to take some fun classes there because I had like general requirement things that I needed to fulfill. And one of the classes that I took was on political theory, but it went over Nietzsche's works. So I got this. This was right around the time when Occupy Wall Street was happening. And on the campus I went to, there was one of the biggest Occupy Wall Street protests over there. And, it was these people, the 99%, angry at the 1%, which was kind of reminiscent of, this sort of slave revolt against the sort of master morality, the strong, you know what I mean? And we learned about this concept called ressentiment, which was something that the slave class had in them, and it was this kind of resentment towards the powerful that ruled over them. And I remember seeing my professor that day during the protest, and she's as a doctorate in political science, she was over there looking at what's essentially a political movement unfolding in front of her. So I went to talk to her, and I was like, "What do you think Nietzsche would say about this?" You know what I mean? And it was kind of a little bit of a joke, because it's basically like, this is ressentiment. This is what it looks like right in front of our face. Here's a bunch of angry people angry at the rich. Not saying they weren't justified, in feeling that way, but it was like, we're pissed, And anyways, I got a few classes on Nietzsche, and then I discovered the red pill shortly after graduating. So when I first saw red pill talking points on the subreddit, I immediately connected it. I was like, oh, this is just a watered down version of Nietzsche's philosophy. And of course, there's other details there. Like it's really about intersexual dynamics and guys trying to figure out how to get laid and all these kinds of things and get women to like them and see what women like and these truths about women and women's nature. But like things like alpha and beta was like immediately obvious in the sense of master or slave morality. The whole thing about like Overman and trying to figure out what to do after this, because it was all about the collapse and there was just like a lot of things there that kind of mirrored Nietzsche's philosophy. So I had already saw that, or like, a beta orbiter or something, someone who's orbiting or has like one-itis. And then if you learned about master morality, and like people who are considered to be living like that have their own, almost like an alpha, they have their own distinct character, a definition. You know what I mean? They're not sort of in anybody else's orbit gravitating around them in a sense. So I saw these parallels, and I always thought it was really interesting because it was this sort of watered down, almost Kool-Aid version of like Nietzsche's philosophy, which is very tough to understand. Even I don't really that much. I always have to go back and try to understand it again.
When I got into having these conversations with guys, I've been doing this, but people really know this. I've been doing this for like 22 years now. Yeah. And I went back, people have asked me this before. I went back to look for my first instance of me using the term red pill on my old forums, like back in 2004. So for the red pill, or what we call the manosphere right now, there was no manosphere back then. But 2004, December of 2004 was the first time I ever found a post of me using that on the old SoSuave.net forums, which, by the way, is still around today. They're still active today. So there was the forum years, and then there was the blog years, and then there's sort of like the social media years sort of gets threaded into that. And then now we're at the YouTube years, right? Or the video production years. And so
I'm hoping he brings up some stuff about men's rights. I doubt he will, but I had Rollo respond to literally one of my tweets on Twitter, in which I engaged on a thread with him. I don't know if I can find it offhand like this, but he basically talks about why men's rights failed, and he said because it wasn't like in organic. I can't remember. I'm gonna try to find it just so I can show it to you guys, but it was almost a year ago. It was right when all this stuff was breaking out. But I do want to show it to you guys if you guys just give me like a minute to try to find it. Damn, I know I screenshotted it in my phone too. Republicans. Could have totally clipped that response to my message and put it on TikTok. You need some child labor clippers. Yeah, I know. I need to get on the on Fiverr and just start messaging some folks over there. I was paying one guy like $7 or something. They did a couple shorts for me. They weren't bad. And then they were supposed to do more, but it just didn't end up happening. And then I talked to another guy, and it's a little tougher than it seems, but I do got to just find some of these folks to just go through my stuff. One thing I'm trying to do is like these streams and, you know, whatever videos, and I can say, hey, can you just go back through my channel? And if I got timestamps for them, all the more better. Damn. How far back was this thing? Sorry, guys. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I found it. All right. It started from here. God, oh yeah, I think I managed to do it. It's worse. If a man is marriage-minded, he's categorized as beta to women. The binary is women F alphas and marry betas. Only betas are motivated to seek marriage. This isn't a priority for alphas with romantic options. So I can't. Even the thing he's responding to is not there anymore because it's suspended. This guy says, if we as a society give up on reconciling marriage laws into a more equal share of liability within a union, how do we stabilize society in the long run? Your pitch appears to be that taking the red pill is a personal antidote to thriving in a society of uncontrolled hypergamy. I responded to him and I said, red pill only provides ways for men to increase short-term options. But unfortunately, there isn't a solution for a long-term option without the man exposing himself to the system in that way. Only worth it to get married if she makes as much or more than you. Smoother divorce. And then this guy, I'm not even sure who this guy is. He might have been around the space. He says, how does the red pill only provide ways for men to increase short-term options? What a weird, inaccurate thing to say. I responded to him and I was like, hi, red pill isn't fighting to change family laws. Just help men thrive in current climate. Marriage isn't recommended. Here's Rollo at 4 minutes and 2 seconds saying we are still trying to figure that out. And I literally put a clip from Rollo's stream saying we haven't figured out the marriage part yet. Then he says, this guy says, the red pill can't fight anything. It's a praxeology. It just is. Any talks beyond that is folly, if you ask me. And I said, I think MRAs, men's rights activists, were focused primarily on fixing the long-term aspect, and red pill is more concerned with creating solutions with women that are ultimately short-term. If laws aren't changed, no real long-term solution for men exists that incentivizes men to marry. And then Rollo actually responded to that. So this is like my one and only interaction with Rollo. And he says, MRAs failed because they were top-down rather than bottom-up. Every social initiative needs to start with the man himself. Change the man and you change the world. So I don't even entirely know what he meant by that. If he means like, you know, there needed to be some sort of grassroots change and just men's mindset. I don't know if he means that that's what he's doing with the red pill in the sense of trying to wake guys up and take them out of the, you know, gynocentric matrix or whatever, so that there can be a social initiative once enough of them have taken that. He didn't really expand on that. You know what I mean? But then is the implication that once enough people are red pill aware, something needs to happen to get the laws changed, since now we're going from bottom up? You know what I mean? But, again, I couldn't get his full thoughts on that. And then I responded. He never responded to me, but I said, Rollo, I think men need to band together to make actionable legal change. A man improving for himself is fine, but we need to turn red pill into a political movement to create legal change. The energy is there, but the leadership isn't. MRAs are needed. So that was my one and only interaction with with Rollo.
I've seen the red pill go from just guys getting together in forums and comparing notes to being guys like having religious, battles with each other and saying, Jesus says the red pill is incompatible with, Orthodox Eastern religion or Catholicism or Mormons or whatever it is. I'm like, dude, that's not the red pill, man.
Yeah.
The red pill to me, anyways, it's the praxeology of intersexual dynamics. And people think that when I say that, people think that that's some sort of cop-out. Because when myself or someone like Mike Sartain or Ryan Stone or some of these other guys that I've been working with for almost, some of them over a decade now, when we are talking about the red pill, we are just talking about factual absolutism. I mean, we're just saying what is true and what is not true. How you use that truth, how you use, and it's really sort of a pursuit of truth is what it is. Praxeology, outside of sort of the economics definition, there's two definitions. There's the economics definition, and then there's the classical Greek definition, which is a praxeology is the study of human behavior, in that human behavior has purpose, has intent, there's a reason why we do those things. It's not about good, it's not about evil, it's not about what's right, what's wrong, it's not even about what's best practices. It's just getting to the point, finding out why we do what we do. And in the red pill sense, that's about intersexual dynamics. It's about male nature, female nature, evolutionary psychology, sociology, neurology, endocrinology. How many ologies do we have, And so it's a very, very broad spectrum, because when you think about how many ways intersexual dynamics crosses into all these like subfields, when people ask me, they say, well, what's the red pill? Give me the elevator pitch for the red pill. There is no elevator pitch for the red pill, because it's like a college major.
Yes.
It's not a bumper sticker. It's not something you just slap on the back of your car and say, I'm red pill, right? So when I'm talking about red pill, I'm talking about like empirical, factual absolutism about the things that are, not the things that should be. The problem is, right now, there's too many people who want to jump into this space and say, this is what should be. So I don't talk about best practices. I talk about what is.
Yes.
So when people say, well, the red pill is this or the red pill is that, it's like, no, you haven't been in this field long enough to understand what a praxeology is or
I
what
find most people who
origins
talk
are.
about it and who criticize it now, it's very clear they first came across the term sometime in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Well, people think that the red pill begins and ends with Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis. That's what they think. And when I listen to
I would include Fresh and Fit in that also. Those kind of top channels during that time.
Personalities like Destiny say, oh, the red pill's dead, it's over now. I'm like, no, dude.
And we saw Sneeko saying that also. And it was ironically Destiny and Sneeko that had the conversation with Rollo about what a high value man is. Caesar with another donation. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Those are real American dollars right there. That's a good point on how the red pill only helps us in the short term. I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, and I guess I should kind of maybe expand a little bit more by what I mean by short term. I don't, what I really mean short term, or rather low commitment, like low leveraging of yourself with the woman, instead of the opposite, which is a huge leveraging of what is yours and yourself. Ideally with more of a longer term commitment. But, you could know a woman for 20 years and be in a casual relationship with her. You know what I mean? I would still consider that short term because it's relatively low commitment and it's relatively low leverage. But if you get married to someone and sign the state contract, or if you have a child with someone and you guys, now that's like high leverage. That's long term to me, in a sense. Now you guys are really, interwoven together in that respect. And the red pill, by understanding that, it can be a solution in as much as it helps guys understand how to attract women, maybe even how to bed women, how to pass the shit test and do all that stuff, and understand these different concepts and break you out of the beta programming and, whatever, spin plates and all that stuff. But it doesn't solve the problem of the long-term over-leveraging that men have to do if they want to have a family and kids. So it takes you right up to that point, and then you can choose to do that. I think, if they wanted to argue with me, they can say, well, there is married TRP, and you can, if you understand a masculine frame and applying dread game properly and competition anxiety, when you flirt with the waitress a little bit and she sees other women like you, and that's going to help with the dead bedroom problems and stuff. But, I tend to like coaches' discussions about that, where he's just, someone like him would probably say it's just impossible to hold masculine frame all the time. And on a long enough time, there's still a heavy chance that it's not going to work, So that's what I really mean by short term. I mean, it just helps guys get there. But then when it comes to like the collective issues we have, like no matter how high value you are or lower or whatever, where on that totem pole or hierarchy, I've seen so many guys of varying status and income go across my desk on child support. And it's like the red pill cannot help you there. So there are actually legal issues, societal issues that we have. Red pill is more just understanding how to cultivate attraction or what diminishes it. And that's good for, what I would call short term. But yeah, so that was kind of a big rant, but that's what I mean by that. And thank you again for the donation, man. I do appreciate all the support to the channel.
It's been going on for, at least in my case, for the last 22, 23 years. Yeah. You simply don't have the depth of knowledge of how we even got to this point in the first place. Because if it makes if it gets click-through rate, if it gets eyes on the screen, if it gets audience retention, if it gets, impressions on YouTube, then that's the new hot topic and everybody wants to be a part of it. The good news is that these things come in cycles. So during 2015, 2016, that election cycle, red pill was whatever people wanted to make it. In 2019, 2020, everybody wanted to pivot out of red pill and wanted to get into social issues and MAGA this and alt-right that. And now we see exactly the same thing happen. So that's when I was talking to Myron and Fresh in March of 2021. That's why I said, I hope not, because what happens is individuals come into this space and they got no business being in the space. Yeah. And suddenly they become authorities on the red pill and they don't even know what they're talking about because they have no background in it. And for the red pill to remain about the facts, about empirical, reality, about the data, about the stats, about the praxeology of the red pill, it kind of has to stay underground. Yeah. It has to, or underground, maybe that's not their term, but it has to be in some way like non-mainstream. Right?
Yeah, well, it gets corrupted otherwise. I mean, one question I was wondering from your perspective, I mean, firstly, how much do you care about sort of owning that term? Is that something, do you get annoyed when you see the term being misused or just sort of being used as a pejorative or just being thrown in this way?
It gets into gatekeeping. It gets into a lot of gatekeeping stuff. And some people, like, we've had discussions about this before in some of the groups I'm in. Should we be gatekeeping? Should we not be gatekeeping? I've always been of the opinion that the red pill is open source. Okay. So I'm not the first word and I'm not the last word. I'm a very loud voice. I've been consistent in the red pill, like I said, for 20 some odd years. So I'd like to think I have at least some sort of authority in this. I have some sort of like recognition and some sort of definitely some notoriety in this. But I'm not the last voice. I'm not the first voice. I'm not the last voice. And by the way, Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis are most definitely not going to be the first or the last either. Well, so same with Myron and Fresh, right?
It's interesting with Tate because Tate, as far as I know, doesn't even call him.
I give him credit for bringing up Myron and Fresh there.
Not anymore, but
did he?
What's interesting? Oh yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I did some of the earliest interviews with Tate. People don't understand my background and my history with Tate. When people say, "Oh, Rollo threw Tate under the bus" or whatever, I'm kind of Tate agnostic right now. But
to be fair, Tate also came out on Twitter and publicly disavowed red pill, and he basically refers to red pillers and people like that as dorks who just can't get women or anything like that. And I think he's been pretty consistent about that for a long time. I don't know if he was ever actually talked about red pill stuff. It's just, him as who he is as a male influencer. The manosphere just seemed to jibe with that a lot.
I did some of the earliest interviews with Tate on my own channel back in 2017 and 2018.
Okay.
And so I've known him. I've known Tristan for probably longer than anybody who wants to, tell you they went to high school together with him, which they didn't, right? So back in the day, he definitely wanted to be Red Pill. He was part of our Red Pill.
That's interesting. That's actually interesting to hear.
Well, what was the Manosphere back then? He was definitely part of that group. And
Manosphere,
and then
yeah.
Tate morphed into the Tate that we know from 2020 on, and so he became he sort of metamorphized into something that we think of as Andrew Tate right now. But back then he definitely was. He called himself Red Pill even on my show. So but now of course what happens is once we get into an election cycle and everybody wants to pivot away, now everybody's Red Pill adjacent, right? And
Red Pill adjacent was very specifically what Brian from whatever podcast said. That was after they had that beef, basically, between Fresh and Fit and whatever, and there was a kind of back and forth between them. And then when Brian went on stream and discussed it, he called himself Red Pill adjacent was the word that he used, and he said that he was inspired by old men's rights guys and all that. Though, to be honest, like his show is mostly just, I guess you could say, blood sports debating or the same stuff. I don't really hear him talking much about men's rights or at least advocating for it in that sense. He seems to mostly platform tradcons. I don't want to get too on his case about that. I get it, you know what I mean? Like he's had Rollo and stuff, but it could just be business. It seemed like there was just a lot of mishmash between his channel and Daily Wire, and we know what Daily Wire thinks, Klaus says Tate, and then greed took over. Exactly. I mean, and that was like the grift and the griftin'. You know what I mean? It was like sign up for Hustlers University. And it's just the stuff he's embroiled in at this point. It's not even worth associating with. You know what I mean? He got arrested and charged again. It's a year later. We're watching a rerun of the same episode. And that's really going to be used to smear this entire thing. That's how you get legislation in UK that, for people who, if they label you as an extreme misogynist or watching extreme misogynist content, you're going to end up, in trouble. And they'll go after those channels, they'll get rid of them. They'll demonetize them. And then once they're done with that, wherever they'll play whack-a-mole with it and keep going. So.
To me, that's fence riding, quite honestly. Like, I'm Rollo Tomassi. I am the Red Pill.
Yeah.
Like, there's no adjacent for me. There's no I'm going to pivot out into, I don't know, make a fishing channel or something. That's not going to work for me. So, I am what I am.
But do you think the term can be reclaimed? Because when I now hear it being used by kind of everyday people, what they mean is not what it's really supposed to mean.
No.
All right. So I've been aware of the terminology as you're referring to it for at least 15 years.
I mean, hell, when you and I first did the first interview together, I was a Red Pill guy and you wanted to have me on the show.
I read The Rational Male around the time it came out. And prior to that, I mean, I was aware of, I don't know, there was all the whole mystery method time and Neil Strauss.
So that was a forum era.
Yes,
and that's
right.
the pickup artist
era. So there was all that. And so I've got a longer term view of, okay, this is what it is. And then now when people talk about red pill or red pill men this or red pill guys that, it's usually it's a straw man typically being used normally by conservatives, but also sometimes by people on the left to kind of just attack, I don't know, people they want to call incels or some type of...
I think the red pill or this area can become political, and it can become a political force. And one of the evidence of that is the fact that conservatives attack it, and the fact that liberal progressive side attacks it. I mean, they wouldn't be attacking it unless it was a legitimate force they were threatened by. This energy could coalesce into something that has political aims or ambitions. And it's just really more about defining those and trying to push for that.
Misogyny and these guys who hate women and they're anti-marriage and they're this. It's like a straw man attack. So in the same way that lots of people on the left they have this idea of, a racist or a white supremacist, and they just kind of throw everything they don't like into that bucket. And I'm now seeing a lot of traditional conservatives even just kind of, there's this basket of icky ideas and people I don't like, and we're just going to call them red pill men. And I'm just going to kind of completely straw man what that means and attack it in that way. So it's at that point where I wonder if the term can be reclaimed. It's a bit like, I've had this conversation with some what I would call decent and reasonable feminists who are very keen on keeping hold of the term feminism and feminist, because they're just like, no, I really mean this as in equality and fairness, and I'm not anti-man, and I'm not, you know, part of some female supremacist movement and so on. And I tend to tell them, I'm like, look, I just think the term has lost its, I don't think it can be reclaimed. I think it's been so corrupted.
The term feminist is, people like identifying as a feminist in the 21st century is virtually meaningless today because, and I've said this I've said this to conservatives, I said this to liberals, I said, if you were born after 1965, you're a feminist. You have had some form of feminism that has influenced your thinking, whether it was in college, whether it was in school, whether it was from like you're watching these Saturday morning cartoons. In some way, shape, or form, you have had feminist ideology just like drip fed into your influences and the things that sort of like, you know, whether it's pop culture, whether it's music, whatever it's just in the air. It's just
even you know, at religious institutions, kind of like, you know, the conversation we saw last time, and some of these people are getting that stuff from going to church and becoming feminist. It's just sort of unconsciously in the culture. Klaus says MGTOW threatens marriage, and that's what the tradcons go against. So that's what might start a change. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, because MGTOW necessarily means men are keeping their wallets, you know, close to them and their funds close to them. I would want to see a change in voting patterns, you know, and I made a video prior, and, you know, my hope was that enough guys like this can sort of band together and just abstain from voting, because it would threaten the tradcon voter base so much, like they would have to take notice instead of just constantly shaming us. But yeah, I mean, I think MGTOW, as far as like a silent walking away, has been very effective, because that it hits things they care about the most, you know, using men as a utility for one, and getting men to participate in the economy in a way that they can just keep the money rolling in. Caesar Quintana says decent feminist. I'm not sure about that one. Yeah, it's an oxymoron, right?
It's in the Western
so when people go, well, you know, only 12% of women identify as feminists, I'm like, this is a 21st century, bro. Like, just like, can we like have a modern conversation? I think you're right, though, as far as the red pill is concerned. And one thing that really kind of rubs me the wrong way is a lot of people want to conflate the red pill as being sort of like the flip side of feminism.
And and that was the accusation from the tradcons. They're just saying red pill is essentially the same thing, you know, as feminism, and that's coming from these people who have done nothing but enable feminism. And it's funny that they would say that, because for a long time, you know, we would even call tradcons kind of undercover feminists in a sense, or at least tradcon women, and tradcons completely enabled the feminism, specifically through things like chivalry and supporting a gynocentric legal system, and just constantly shaming men to be these kind of disposable things, and not being able to call out the women, especially since they're so pure and don't have agency and can't do anything wrong. But yeah, that was their argument against the red pillars. But one of the, you know, it's like necessarily men, my opinion is that men really have no choice but to step outside of the traditional role assigned for them. And that's really because the traditional role on the other side that women would have once occupied has been, you know, blasted to pieces. So being a traditional guy usually just gets you used and chewed up and spit out over.
I think that's one of the biggest straw men that sort of mostly conservatives, traditional conservatives, would like to conflate it as. I'll get back to that in a second, but more to your point here is like, well, can we reclaim it? Can we bring it back to what it is? I think it's going to happen regardless, because once we, you know, it'll happen on November 6th.
Okay.
It's where right the day after the election, all this stuff just goes poof, because it's exactly what happened right after the 2020 election. We just got out of COVID and we just got out of all this other stuff.
One thing, you know, I can even agree with them on is just the fact that, you know, if red pill gets smeared and collapses and all that, I think it's more so just this iteration. And, you know, I think what we'll see going forward is a new sort of manifestation of the red pill. Because the fact is the problems aren't going away. You know, they haven't fixed marriage. The long-term contractor deal hasn't been adjusted to match with the modern environment, or even postmodern, if you want to say that. So since that's not going away and men are continually being demonized and pushed away, something's going to manifest again. And I hope the next iteration, I think naturally it will just be more sophisticated this time, because we've already gone through these growing pains at this point.
And people were not thinking about politics anymore. They weren't talking about BLM. They weren't talking about Antifa. They weren't talking about this. So suddenly all that stuff just goes away after the election's gone. And now we have to find something else to talk about. And lo and behold, that's right about the time that Myron and Fresh started Fresh and Fit, right? Yes. January of 2021, right after the election. And so what happens is they got in at the right time. Like, that's when the cycle was fresh at that point. But as far as sort of reclaiming the name, I think it won't be too difficult to do, because so many people are abandoning it right now. So all the people who wanted to get on the red pill train and either be on these podcasts or be a quote unquote red pill influencer, now the best of them are red pill adjacent. The worst of them are just like, you know, throw you under the bus and we never knew you, even though they've been making gravy money off of it for the last 2 or 3 years, just by wanting to be associated, standing in the same room with the red pill, right? So I think that, as I said before, when I was telling them I hope it doesn't go mainstream, once again, the reason why we even would need to reclaim the name or find some way to sort of re-identify, to redefine it, is because we have had so many bad actors come in here and just basically be the whipping boy there. You know,
this was a conversation we had, I think, a couple streams ago and in the Discord too. It's just like whenever something like this hits a certain critical mass, you know, it gets hijacked. Whether it's the conservative Daily Wire types that are trying to grab hold of this and firmly root it back into the conservative side, you know, to keep the votes going, to keep the support going. Even though they're doing that through shaming instead of actually providing meaningful solutions, which is the sad part. But beyond them, I mean, there's other people that come in and, you know, selling the self-improvement courses or whatever they're doing. Those are people that just kind of hijack that energy to get whatever they're looking for out of that. And, you know, he's basically saying as much when he talks about bad actors, and then that gives the whole movement a bad name. And, you know, it's stuff we've seen before.
For instance, I mean, one of the things I talk about when it comes to, like, say, Pearl Davis. Pearl Davis is the worst thing that ever happened to the red pill. Simple as that. Because she goes on there and it's like her only purpose is to be ridiculous, is to represent the red pill and be ridiculous, so people can point to her and say that's what the red pill is, or Tate, that's what the red pill is, or whoever, like, name the worst culprits you can, whoever the straw men are that are there to characterize the red pill or to represent the red pill, and it's easy to attack those people. That's what ends up becoming the universal sort of definition of what red pill is.
And that's what, you know, Daily Wire did very specifically, is they looked for who they thought could be an easy target to try to have this conversation, because they're looking for a media win to dunk on somebody so that they can show that to their own viewers and say, look how ridiculous their arguments are. You know, and with Pearl, I can see what he's saying for sure. You know, I remember Coach Greg Adams interviewed Pearl and had her on his show. And I think he even told her, maintained that, you know, she was going up, you know, her channel was blown up and everything. And, you know, Coach, and good for her, you know, and everything, but it was more in the sense of, like, you know, only men more so would be a better representative of this because they're living it and they understand it, especially someone like Coach who's been married and divorced and been through it. Now, to give Pearl credit, I mean, I've spoken with her, you know, and she graciously gave me an interview, and from my, chats with her, I can see the evolution in her thinking. You know what I mean? So she has been able to recognize what the tradcons are doing, and she's one of the few creators that calls them out, pretty regularly and loudly on Twitter and stuff like that. So, I understand like Rollo's frustration, but the way I kind of see it is, you can work hard in a field, but there is a certain level, a certain aspect of where it's almost just, it's up to God, whoever he decides to lift up to into the stars. You know what I mean? Some people can work on playing the violin or try to be an amazing rapper or comedian, but sometimes something just happens and the hand of God comes out and lifts Dave Chappelle to the top, or Chris Rock. And there might be a ton of great comedians, maybe even people who understand comedy better than them at your local comedy club somewhere that's been doing it for 25 years. But you just have to work with that. And I would like to see more unity and people giving support where they can. But again, I get it. There's a lot of people in here just trying to make some money and all that.
I've said this on several other podcasts, but if there is no boogeyman, nobody gets paid. So there has to be, like, it used to be, I'll tell you, it's funny, it's like back in 2019, the boogeyman was pickup artists.
Okay.
Which was kind of, it was laughable to me at the time because there haven't been pickup artists in like 20 years.
This is in maybe peak Rouge V kind of time.
Well, even Rouge, I wouldn't even say that. Like,
no.
when people talk about, like, back then when people were talking about, like, they were sort of making the straw man was PUAs, right?
Okay.
And so they would conjure this image of, like, say, mystery and, like, like a top hat and like a feather boa and black fingernail polish, and he's got this, digital, reader on his things, and he's in elevator boots, and that's we can laugh about it even today, right? Because it's ridiculous, but that's what people were saying. Oh, you don't want to be like that. You want to be a traditional man and have a wife and 4.5 kids, and and that. Now, of course, now we're pointing at like guys like Dan Bilzerian or people who are like living the life with, like, they're single with a lot of women, versus the family man with one woman and a lot of kids, right? So now we're sort of pitting those two together. But as I said, I think probably once the election cycle's over, that conversation is not going to carry the same water that it does right now.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So there are a lot of people out there, a lot of people, including people I know, people I'm close to, who have the idea that red pill is an ideology that's about misogyny, it's anti-women, it's anti-marriage.
I mean, they care. That's how if you look up MGTOW right now on Wikipedia, literally describes it as a male supremacist movement, which is, that doesn't even make sense, but it's completely meant to smear it. So it's, of course they would do that with red pill or anything at this point.
It's anti-family, it's anti-religion, and that is their genuine understanding of what it means. How do you think that happened?
As I said before, they need a boogeyman. They need a straw man that they can point and sputter at. It kind of depends on the accounts, because I see a lot of personalities sort of come into this space, and it's easy pickings to jump into the manosphere and say those guys are ridiculous, but my religion says that this is the way to go. And it's like, well, then what is it? It's Eastern Orthodox. Are you Orthodox Catholic? Are you evangelical? Are you whatever it is? And so, but they can all agree to hate on the red pill.
Yes.
Like that's the whipping boy, right? So they can all unite. It doesn't matter what franchise of Christianity you are. We can all we all agree we hate those red pill guys. Yes, yeah. So, but again, as you were saying,
I guess a question to ask too. I mean, because I think he's right about that. And it's they would paint it as definitely immoral and as something that spreads degeneracy, as they say. But, I think it could just be more characterized as giving men information to navigate a world that has kind of already degenerated, especially from things like feminism and what we're dealing with now. And it's just given men an understanding of, why the marriage went south or why she cheated on you or really what happened and just understand the blue pill conditioning and these kinds of things, but the problem, I think, for a lot of what he's talking about, those different brands of religions, followers, is that the red pill is showing them things that they never talked about, and they're caught with their pants down, and they're losing people that want to attend or go there. but they just refuse to admit, what the issues really are. It's just always it's your fault, man. The red pill might even say that in its own way, in the sense of like, well, beta behavior and these kinds of things, these are your mistakes that you made. Here's how female nature really works. But it at least provided some sense of control to men and understanding, versus just faith and try harder and better luck next time, or as Coach calls the hope strategy.
It's a convenient straw man. So, but I don't fit those molds, and I'm not trying to like personalize this or anything like that. But like one of the reasons I don't get the call from guys like Chris Williamson, or I don't get the call from some of these more like bigger name. I shouldn't say Tim Pool, because Tim Pool had me on not too long ago. But the reason I don't get Matt Walsh, for example, or the reason I don't get Michael Knowles.
I think you guys would have such a good conversation.
I think so too. And I'll tell you what's interesting is like Matt Walsh just had on a good friend of mine, which is Jim Sexton. He's the divorce attorney. And by the way, you should have him on this show. I'll hook you up with.
And remember when last fall when this happened, there was supposed to be a kind of Super Bowl debate that Fresh and Fit was going to host, and then whatever didn't want to host it, but Rollo had done a stream where he was talking about they were trying to have James Sexton, Rollo, and I think Pearl, all three of them at the same time, talk with Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh. So it would be a kind of roundtable discussion. And then at the last minute, they bumped Rollo out of it, and it was just Pearl and James Sexton with Matt Walsh and I think Michael Knowles. And Rollo describes basically his conversation with James Sexton and convincing James Sexton to deny that deal with the Daily Wire producers because of, Rollo's, well, I guess you could say lack of relationship, or however, his opinion of Pearl and what he doesn't like about her, because he figured Pearl was doing something in the background to try to X him out so that she can have James Sexton there to help her with this debate. And then what we ended up with was two debates. One was Pearl with Michael Knowles, and the other one was James Sexton with Matt Walsh. And, I think both of them were fairly lackluster compared to the debate I was hoping we would see.
With Jim. But because Jim was he and I are very good friends, right? He reads my book. I've been, sort of back and forth with him for a long time. And he just got on with Matt and was just basically just spelling out like what I would have said about like divorce and marriage and everything else. But it sounds different coming from a guy who's been a divorce attorney for like 22 odd years instead of like just me. But it's still a red pill conversation that he's having. Mm-hmm. It's just he's being educated. And so when I talk about the red pill, as I said, it's a praxeology, and people don't like it when I call it that because they think it should be more. You can't tell people information, you can't give them facts these days without telling them how to feel about those facts. So if I break my own rules all the time, which is like you got to give people interpretation. It's one thing to have stats and data. It's another thing to give your interpretation of those stats and those data. And you also can't do it in isolation. So too many people just focus on, and the red pill, like a lot of the guys who, personalities in the red pill are guilty of this just as well. So when I present a data point, I try to do it in correlation to other data points, right? So you can't, instead of just looking at one little teeny tiny tree, you have to see the forest, right? So, but I'm like probably one of the few guys that'll do that, because focusing on just that one tree, that's what gets you clicks. That's what gets you engagement. That's what gets you Elon bucks. That's what gets you. Impressions on YouTube, right? So there's the business of all this.
Yo, Mr. Pitt, welcome in, man, and appreciate that. Yeah, please like the video if you're watching. That would definitely help me a lot, and I appreciate everyone's support and viewership. Being a personality, being an influencer. And then there's sort of like having a dedication to mission, which is what I've been trying to, say for a long time. But when we start talking about, like, I hear this all the time, that the red pill is an ideology, the red pill is a belief set, the red pill is a cult, the red pill is a religion, the red pill is a philosophy, the red pill is a movement. It is none of those things. In its purest form, the red pill is just praxeology. It is just information. And as I said before, if you just give people information and you don't tell them how to feel about it, they will hate you for it. Or else they will insert their own interpretation and tell you what you think about the information, the data that you just gave. It can be completely neutral.
But they, just by the very fact of you tweeting it out or relating it on Substack, or well, I'm a writer, so I go to Substack, but or you put it on your podcast or something, people want to fill in the blanks that you left out just by giving them that data. So if you don't tell them how to feel about it, then they're either going to hate you for that, or they're going to think that, oh, he must agree with me because this data fits with my pre-existing biases. Or it goes against my religion, and this is data, and the only reason Rollo will be relating this is because he hates God, right? Or he hates this religion, or he hates something else. It's like, no, I'm giving you this data so that you can use this and educate yourself. And that's really all I've ever been about. I don't give prescriptions. I don't give advice, right? And I just had this happen.
You know, and I can hear you saying, yes, the red pill in its purest form is just a praxeology about you know, attraction and men and women and at its purest form. But the thing is you still have people who are discovering that, and then they're trying to figure out what to do next. And then we still have this problem of the long-term deal between men and women not solved. And this is where I think there can really be a good synergy, a great relationship. Synergy seems to be like my favorite word today. But between men's rights and, you know, red pillars in general, and I would like to see a kind of revival of men's rights, because the red pill can at least explain behavior, or maybe try to understand on that level why things are happening. But without some kind of movement or political movement to try to get things changed, I mean, we're all looking at essentially taking one of a number of what could even be called cope strategies. I didn't want to call, you know, Coach will say hope. I'm going to say cope strategies, whether that's, you know, leaving a sinking ship. I get it. Like, you can become a passport bro. Nothing against them. I mean, if you can, and you can find a better place elsewhere, that's great. I'd support that for you. But I don't think it's sustainable for everybody, and not a lot of people are going to have that option to be able to do that. Or going on the self-improvement you know, journey, and again, it's just not sustainable. Not everyone's going to be this hyper masculine Andrew Tate style thing, to where what Coach would call the snake charmer, you know, these people the women on the other side having, you know, unrealistic expectations, and then you do everything you can to meet those unrealistic expectations. It's also a kind of problem in itself. And again, that's not sustainable. So men are still here trying to figure out, you know, where to put their support behind and what to do.
Happened this morning, as a matter of fact, on Twitter, where it's like, you know, this is bad advice. I'm like, dude, why do you think this is advice? If you're going to Twitter for life advice, you have a bigger problem than me telling you this data.
Yeah, but the thing is, that
might be a reference to the vasectomy tweet that he did, and that kind of caused the split in the whole thing, you know.
That's where we are. You know, it's a sad indictment on our society that so many young men and women look to the internet and social media and podcasts and influencers for advice. But I think the reality is that they do. We're just in this new age, and I don't.
Well, and the question is why? Okay, there's the convenience factor, but it's also because the primary institutions that citizens are supposed to depend on to get good advice or to understand how to live here are kind of disintegrating, or have become, you know, at best ineffective, whether that's, you know, someone going to church or the school or the government or whatever. And we're in this situation. So there's a lot of people experiencing this frustration, and they're going to go somewhere. And sadly, there are people willing to take advantage of those kinds of people. I would consider Andrew Tate one of those people.
Presume that anything you say is advice. Well, I think, just by virtue of you being an influencer.
Yeah. Well, I think that both,
which, by the way, I hate that name. I hate influencer title. Yeah.
But I think both on the communicator side and on the receiver side, it's extremely difficult for the human brain to separate is from ought.
Yes.
So if you just say a factual statement, that is interpreted by a lot of people as you are saying this is how it should be, or this is how you want it to be, or you're suggesting all of these other things. Like, you could just say a data point, and people will interpret that in all of their different ways. They run it through their own personal black box.
Processing it, yeah.
And I also think that a lot of people speaking, it's like there can be someone who says, okay, I'm just giving information. But I think it's actually quite hard to just do that, because we even do have a tendency. We all do have an idea of how.
It's almost like he's talking about the right and left hemisphere split. You know, we have one side of our brain that is very literal, and it'll take information or facts, and then there's the other side of our brain which is symbolic and it's contextual, and it places the things we see in the context, in the environment. One is a state of being, and the other one is more thinking about that. And it almost makes me think that, like, you know, he could say, well, I'm just giving facts. Yes, but you can almost not give facts without some kind of framing, or in the sense of people do have this need. It's like, okay, you're giving a fact, but why are you giving it at this time, right now, at this location, at this time, right after this happened, or, you know, whatever it is? Then it has some sort of bearing or meaning or some sort of influence by putting a fact out at a specific time. It has some sort of influence in the world around it, and it does affect those things. So you can't expect someone to just take it and then not try to place that contextually somewhere.
How the world should be and how things ought to be and what you should do with certain information.
I always
so it's hard not
acknowledge
to-
personal bias. Like when I'm whether it's in the introductions of my books, I try to make a point of this in my intros, is that I understand that there's no way you're ever going, and any human being is going to get around implicit bias. That's not going to happen, because we all have it, right? So you can be as neutral and as objective as humanly possible, but there's still you still have to factor in the element that the reason why you would be interested in this stuff in the first place is probably because you have some sort of implicit bias.
Yeah, and that's true. And then so there is a context that these just fact statements are feeding into, and it's having a very real effect. So I don't want to say it's unfair, but you know, I feel like you can't say something like that, and then when things start happening and there's downstream effects, to say, well, I was just giving information. I get that, but you did choose to give it at a very specific time to very specific people.
Bias, right? But I don't think that means we shouldn't take a good stab at it. I don't think that means we shouldn't, like, at least try to find some way to connect dots. And again, that's another thing from the intros of my books. I think that one of the reasons why I'm seeing a lot of sort of evolutionary psychologist apologists today, they're apologizing for the red pill because we ask the right questions, or maybe the wrong questions in this term. And so even if we get something wrong, we're still asking questions that other people aren't. That we're making correlations that other people either are unwilling or unable to do for whatever reason.
Yeah, and usually because those questions kind of bump up against whatever moral value systems we have. And that was the case with the r/seduction subreddit. And that's what Whisper was talking about in his interview on Red Pill University. I'll have to bring that up. I think that would be a good listen for us also. But the Red Pill subreddit allowed questions like that to be asked, where other places, because it seemed immoral, you could not do that. And then by allowing those questions to be asked, it got us to an understanding we did not have before.
Maybe they don't want to lose their tenure at their college. Maybe it's just something that's not going to sell them books. Maybe it's not going to get them more people to their dating site, whatever it is. But the fact that human beings, we still have an emotional element to us, so we're always going to have implicit bias. But again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't make a good stab at it. So, and that's what I always try for. So when the title of my books is The Rational Male. So when I get pissed off at something, or like I watch like Myron Gaines he broke his like coffee cup the other day, people go, "Oh, look how emotional he's getting," and I'm just like, "Well, yeah, he's a human being, man." Like because this righteous anger that's coming out of Myron, right? And it's not that I don't expect guys to be like Mr. Spock, like completely devoid of emotions. That's a human element. We still have to have emotions. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's when those emotions are what guide us in making life decisions, rather than using our rational, learned experience, our learning, our reason, that part of it. I break down sort of human, like, interpretive processes into instinct, emotion, and reason, okay? Instinct is the fastest. So, like, for instance, if I were to throw something at you, you dodge out of the way, right? That's instinct, and it's immediate and it's fast. Emotion is a little bit slower than instinct, but it is we do this so that we can interpret our surroundings and process the stimuli that's sort of around us. And then there's reason, and reason is the slowest version of this. Hang on one second. Reason is the slowest version of that because it requires learning. And it requires you to have experienced something and taken something away from that past experience and then apply it to a new experience that is similar to that one. That's the slowest part of that. So when we're talking about reason, we're using like learning, our learned intelligence. When we're applying that, that's really tough to do when we have been taught, well, we've kind of been conditioned, I should say, really since right around the post-sexual revolution era, that we should be thinking with, or we should be making decisions with our heart and our, it's all about how you feel inside, right? And it's like, no, we need to start I think we really need to start making more decisions based on our rational, reasonable judgment.
If you guys want a good book on how our brain operates, and you should read The Master and His Emissary. And it's a tough book. It's a long one, but it does a great breakdown of how the brain works in the sense of like taking information or placing context in the sort of interaction between the right and left hemisphere. I think it does a good job of explaining even a lot of some of the stuff he's explaining in terms of reason and how the brain does reason. Mr. Pitt says, you can say you're only providing facts all you want, but when those facts always lead to a finite set of inevitable and actionable conclusions, it essentially amounts to advice. Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I mean, the praxeology thing is, I get what he's saying. Yes, it's the Chilton manual, like this is a shit test, this is typically what passes a shit test. This is what happens when you fail and all that. But understanding these things does kind of walk people down a certain alley, and again, like if I had to challenge the just praxeology claim or statement here, I would say necessarily opting for the red pill means rejecting the blue pill, which is essentially the morality we have, whether that's tradcon morality or progressive liberal, values, if you're a guy on that side. So learning the red pill necessarily shows you that those values aren't as valuable as you thought they were. And it leaves you kind of wondering like, okay, what now? So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that.
That doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we kill off our emotional side. It's impossible to do. It's like carving out a part of your brain. So the red pill's never been, at least my definition, has never been about being completely non-emotional. It's just that, are you leading with your emotions? Are you in your emotions? So it's feels before reals. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yo, Robert Spencer, big shout out to you. Get the cop sirens going on. Thank you so much for the generosity and the support for the channel, Robert. It's always a pleasure to have you in here. Our resident libertarian forum moderator legend. Good to see you, man.
It needs to be reals before feels, but that doesn't mean there is no feels, at the tail end of that. And we really need to sort of get back to, I think, whether it be religion or politics or social issues or whatever else, we need to start putting off the feeling side and actually start getting into the reason side, not to the exception of emotion, because emotion is always going to be there. But
you know what's funny? It kind of makes me think of Ben Shapiro. You know how he'll say facts don't care about your feelings? And I always want to say back, like votes don't care about your facts, because people are human and we do operate off of feelings. And I think a lot of, what you can even call the mob, this kind of great beast, because not everyone has time to sit here and understand the truth of things, and we can't all be philosopher kings in Plato's Republic. Most people are working. Feelings and instincts start to have influences on our decision making, and people are really, really good at playing at us like that, almost to like a magician level.
We need to start putting reals before feels, and I think we'd probably be in a better place as a society if we actually did that.
I agree. I think that across the entire West,
Like someone like Andrew Tate is a master at that. You know what I mean? It's like, let me tell you everything that's wrong with you and put this void in you and make you feel like crap. Now let me offer you the solution. Sign up for Hustlers University.
I mean, we live in very gynocentric societies. And when I say that, I don't even explicitly mean as the split between the male and the female sex. I just think that society overall, its mentality, its way of doing things has been very heavily
In the feminine.
feminized. So the feels before the reels has become the general way that things are in the UK and Canada, in the USA and Australia, in certain parts of Western Europe. I mean, it's like there's no greater sin. It's like it's worse to say something honest that hurts someone's feelings than to lie.
Yeah.
I would say that is the wrong way around. I would say, no, it's better to tell the truth and risk hurting people's feelings than it is to lie, even if the lie makes people feel good.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of reminds me of something. I remember working at child support. I had this trainer, and this was when I was new. We would do these things called, they were like mock phone calls. I even had to do some of them when I became a trainer for the new people. But it was before we got out on the floor, and it was like, okay, this is what it's going to be like calling up actual people that owe child support. And it's training for us to try to be able to get payments out of people, because we'd have to call them up and tell them what's going on with the case and that they're in back pay. We need them to make a payment now today, because as many payments as we can get in, this is going to increase our performance measures. And we want to be able to show the federal government we got great performance so that they can give us more money. That's another thing. But I had this trainer, and he was the one who was on the other side of the phone, and he would be like a very unruly non-custodial parent, as we called them back then. And one of the things he told us was that, you can be right or you can get what you want. So the person on the phone might say something, and you might, that might even be wrong, and you might want to correct them, but it's just going to make them angry at you, and then you're not going to get the payment on the case, So sometimes you have to do what you got to do basically to get them to pay. And, what he's discussing here is it's always better to tell the truth or whatever, even if it's going to get them mad. And I think I was like that for a long time in my life. But as I got older, there needs to be a certain measure of tact in how you tell the truth. I mean, if the truth was a metaphor, sometimes it can be very ugly and bitter, and it can be almost rude to say that. I mean, in our culture too, it's like that. I can go up to someone and say, it is about context to some degree. So I don't know if I entirely agree with him about that, but it depends on the relationship. It depends on what you're getting from the relationship. It depends on if you want the relationship to continue, what you value in that.
I don't want to dwell too much on the issue, but I do think the most obvious version of this is the entire transgender issue, right? The whole concept is...
I mean, let's say the people on the right or conservatives have been telling the truth as it is to, let's say, the feminists on the other side, and letting them know that their high body counts or whatever is not going to help them, and that they're just a bunch of promiscuous whatever. I don't know. But then at the same time, like, has that shaming actually worked? People will say bring back shaming, but it's like, does shaming actually work, or does it just make people dig in their heels more, especially when you attack their egos that way? Catch more flies with honey, as the saying goes. Or does shaming only work when there's actual consequences, like maybe even actual legal consequences? Then you can shame someone because they clearly know what's going to happen at the end of that line, versus we live in a free society and they know this triggers you, and you're going to sit here and try to trigger them back. And it's like, is that going to work? It doesn't seem to be.
Nope. If that big strong man with the beard says that he is a woman and you say, no,
You're not.
then okay, you may be factually correct, but you are morally and emotionally and ethically wrong now. And we're going to prioritize the feelings over the reality. If that means girls are getting smashed in their sports, so be it. If that means women are losing beauty pageants to males, so be it. If that means men are being housed in female prisons and now female prisoners are magically getting pregnant, so be it. If it means that we're putting out a news report on a criminal who's on the loose, and we're going to put she pronouns, even though it's a guy, because we don't even want to risk the feelings of this person who's just murdered someone. That's how far
how far
this
gone
whole
we are.
thing has gone. Yeah.
Well, we're pandering to a neurosis is what we're really doing. And when I talk about this, I usually go for I forget the guy's name, the man's name, who was the #1 swimmer in female swimming, and he's like the number 436, male swimmer,
William
or something like that.
Leo Thomas.
And I remember when that came out, and I started commenting on that. You have to be really careful, because if you say even the word trans on YouTube, that's that triggers the algorithm. Right? You can't even say trans. You can say MFer. Like, I can't say it on here, but you can say that's okay on YouTube, but you can't say trans, right? Because there is such an investment in emotionalism, and that's where you want to talk about a religion. Emotionalism is the religion. Okay, so and
it's funny when you think of it like Red Pill too, and when it comes to Red Pill, understanding, when Red Pill was just a subreddit, the sort of maxim thrown around was don't talk about Red Pill. So it's like Fight Club. You don't talk about Red Pill. You don't talk about Red Pill. There's never any point in sitting here and having this argument with your girlfriend or your wife about how all this stuff really works, and that's why she should listen to you, because everybody on that subreddit knows that that's not going to work. Even if you're right, then it's just going to crash the relationship or something. Like, you can't negotiate attraction in that way. So I get what he's saying or about the sports and this kind of stuff, but at the same time, the Red Pill itself almost describes something that you wouldn't want to use rationality and logic to at least communicate explicitly. It's just more of these implicit strategies that play off of how people feel in order to get them to do what you want them to do.
In my
or
fourth
behave
book, which, by the way, I
to.
quoted you in.
Yeah, no, I read it.
You
Thank
did
you.
read that one. Okay. In that book, I make a distinction between like if you want to tear down any sort of social issue, any sort of institution that's sort of the woke, lefty, progressivist side of the spectrum wants to sort of push out there, like whether it's trans athletes and whatever, all you have to do is kick out the four legs of the stool. Okay, the four legs of the stool are social constructionism, which is a lie and has been the nature versus nurture debate has been over for like since the mid 2000s, and people still haven't caught up to this. Okay, it's the laws of behavioral genetics. Okay, personality is inherited. Gender identity is inherited. It's heritable. It is a biological process. So one of the things that like the woke left like to bring up all the time is that there is a distinction between gender and sex, right? Oh, well, one's a social construct. Like, no, they're not, because gender identity is downstream from biology, from neurology. Okay, so the only reason you even have a concept of male and female to have an identity in the first place is because your brain architecture is either male or female. That's it, right? So when you take that lie away and say that, and you have you make no distinction between gender and sex, you take that away. Think about how many edifices of the woke left crumble when you take that away. Take away social constructionism. Crumbles. What crumbles as a result of that? The blank slate. We're all the same. No, we're not. We are most definitely not. Take that away. It's gone. Take away emotionalism. Feels before reals. Take that leg off of the stool. Everything starts to collapse. And then you take away egalitarianism. Take that out, and into everything. Every single issue, every single belief, every single ideology that is a secular ideology. I call it a secular religion because that's basically what it is. You take away social constructionism, emotionalism, egalitarianism, and the blank slate, those four legs of the stool, and every single institution that they can talk about collapses. And all four of those are easily provable, easily destroyed. Yeah. And I think more.
Well, and I'm not to disagree or say he's even wrong there, but it's just like, say you do that and you manage to have this debate or discussion with them, does that make them behave in a way that's going to get them on board to make things better? Or are they still going to want to do it because they feel compelled to do that? Or they're just going to get more angry at you and close up their ears? I think of like Whatever podcast. I mean, I think they've had probably one or two of those ladies come around, but a lot of the times it just doesn't work. At least it seems that way. So ultimately you have to find a way that incentivizes them to come to the table to help change things that's better in a way that might make sense for them as well. That's the tough part.
Like traditional conservatives, instead of making louder emotional appeals and emotional arguments, stop it. Start making rational arguments. And because once you do that, they can't defend against those things, and everything comes crashing down. I'll give you one last example here. Did you see this? When Matt Walsh went on Dr. Phil, and he went on there with the bearded lady.
Yes.
That's all I think I get. I don't know the name, so that's all I said. It's the bearded lady. And he had a friend with him, and then there was that lady professor, that feminist professor that was on a gender studies professor that happened to be on. And by the way, it's classic Dr. Phil to like set that. That's like perfect. But I watched that, and of course, this was when Matt was doing his "What Is a Woman" thing, and this was before the documentary had come out. And I didn't know that there's a documentary, and so I was like, "Yeah, Matt, go, go, go!" And then I realized he had this documentary. He's just doing this for content. I'm like, "Ugh." But he had a really good. He was trying to make an argument based in. He was the first time I ever seen anybody try to make, especially from tradcons, try to make an argument based on empirical reality. Like, are you a cat? Like his classic. He runs through this sort of script every time he does. And I thought about this, and I did a full dedicated show when a reaction video to this when it came out. And I was watching this, and I go, there's no way he's going to ever corner these people with logic. It's never going to happen, because here's what would be required, is if he were to say, empirically, provably say, your identity is false. If he says, look, a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and here's why. The reason why the bearded lady couldn't give Matt Walsh a definitive, distinct, empirical, black or white, objective answer, what is a man and what is a woman, is because if she did,
the whole worldview comes
then
crashing down.
What would be required is for that to go and re-examine their own identity and everything that sort of made their personality from the time they were like 3 years old up to
their sense of self. I mean, it would be shattered, and they'd have to go through this hero's journey of reconstructing it.
I don't know how old they are, in their 30s, right? And that's sort of a microcosm of everything. Like when we're having conversations, whether it's with tradcons or with leftists, is if you challenge people's ego investments in things with empirical data, with empirical, objective, provable, here it is, black and white, I've got the data right here. You have two choices. You either accept that and you start re-examining your life, which nobody wants to do, or you go into denial. And that's exactly where you find like sort of this whole transgender issue thing is they go into denial. But it's basically an emotional argument against another emotional argument, rather than in between. There's factual absolutism that can destroy both of those. And if tradcons wanted to win this debate, they wouldn't be trying to make louder emotional appeals. They would be making rational appeals. But as I said, you can't give people data without telling them how to feel about it. So there's that emotional element that goes in there.
Rollo, something I've noticed.
Maybe like in how to feel about it is more so like, here's this information, here's how to properly, it's not even about how to feel about it, but here's how to properly integrate it. Oh gosh, can't speak today. Here's how to properly fit it into the model worldview that you currently have, especially if you're part of our team, whether you're tradcon or whatever. And that's kind of one of the things we get to watch. We get to watch facts come out, and you get to see how these different tribes or, people with these different ideologies then process the information. And we've kind of seen that with red pill talking points or whatever their rationalization is, but the problem is like with tradcons, okay, if they accept everything, even that the red pill says is true, it does threaten their sense of self or their sense of identity, and they can't let that crash, because then everything else disintegrates with it.
And I find this a little bit bizarre because I am a Westerner in many ways, but my family background is
Dubai, right?
My family.
Hey, Kinky Minx, welcome in from the Twitch. Good to see you. I forget that the Twitch is active sometimes, but thanks for coming in here. Kinky's been watching me back from the video game playing days. Welcome in.
From Nigeria. I live in Dubai now. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I thought
you were in the UK for some reason.
I didn't know you lived
I'm British.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh, so
I'm British.
You grew up in Britain?
grew up primarily in Saudi, but went to boarding school in the UK from 11 and went to university there. So I kind of lived in Saudi for 20 years and
We have
lived
had
in
this
the UK
conversation before.
lived in the UK for 20 years, even though I'm under 40. There was like a lot of overlap. But something I find really peculiar in the West, and I see this every day in different ways, and I see it both from liberals, conservatives, centrists, and so on, but I find an interesting just discomfort in the West about the idea that men and women are different. I find that whenever that topic and subject and those discussions come up, there's this strange discomfort.
I mean, I would think that's largely born out of, you can say, like the feminist struggle to get equal rights. So anything that possibly threatens or even seems like it's going to start on the road of taking away rights from, you can say, from women, no, you know what I mean? It has to be the same because they have to protect those rights.
Where so many people.
Caesar says it doesn't seem any of the TradCon debates ever convince anyone of anything. All the support they get are from people who already agreed with them to begin with. Yeah, it's definitely a huge echo chamber. Kind of reminds me of this book. Maybe I think it's in the Discord. There's a section in there called books. I'll add it in later if it's not. But it was from Robert Anton Wilson, and it's called Prometheus Rising. And it's written a while ago, probably in like the 90s or 80s. It's an old book. But he has like the 8-level model of reality or something that he's proposing. Or of consciousness, basically. And like the first and second level, like it starts from this very primitive, like almost ape-like mindset, you know, and he describes politics in the sense of like just two bands of chimps or whatever just arguing with each other. And that's a lot of what politics is. It's my team versus their team. You know, there's a friend-enemy distinction. And even if there's a part of them that might even know or doubt or whatever, they're trained to like get rid of those doubts and agree with, you know, whoever their team is. And then you just end up in what Robert Anton Wilson called the reality tunnel, but it's basically an echo chamber.
People I think have been sucked into the egalitarian idea, that the idea that men and women have like some really core fundamental differences beyond just the most obvious things. I just find that makes people deeply uncomfortable. And I don't really know why, because in most of the world, it's not like that. In most of the world, it's just understood and accepted that males and females are different. Therefore, we have gender roles. Therefore, we do certain things
Division of labor.
differently.
And laws are different, you know, in different places. The whole this egalitarianism, and I think he's talking about it not in the sense of like the Enlightenment ideal of freedom, but more recently, that there's no difference in the roles of men and women. It's just largely born out of women wanting equal rights, the exact same rights with men, instead of a set of rights that maybe are more particular to who they are. So people who support that, they have to buy into egalitarianism for that reason. In other parts of the world where that isn't the case, then it would seem ridiculous. But our laws say, you know, both men and women can be able to do can do the same job, and that there can be no discrimination there based off of anything. So that, I think it's largely born out of that and that struggle. And then if they disagree with that, it kind of opens up this road of saying, well, you know, equal rights, or maybe men should be given preference for this or women for that. And that's something they don't want to contend with.
And here it's just like people just
bristle.
Yeah, people bristle. Why is that? Why?
Because really, since the sexual revolution, we have had this press towards gender parity, right? Or this idea that
gender parity through equal rights,
that men and women there's your ought and should be equal. And I will tell you right now, equality is a false god and has been so for quite some time. I really threw the audience on Dr. Phil for a loop when I said I don't believe in equality. And people were like, oh my God. Was his wife Robin McGraw was like this the whole time. Exactly. It was like blasphemy because that's the religion. The religion is equality, right? We should all be more equal. We're all equal in the sight of the Lord, that kind of stuff. No, we're not. No, we aren't. There are people who are more respectable than other people. There are people who are homeless out here on the streets right now, and then there's people who are at the top of the win right now who are more respectable than those guys. It's just simply the reality that we live in. Are we all equal value, towards God and whatever? Yeah, okay, we can make that case. But we're living right here on planet Earth, and I will tell you right now, it is not. There's no such thing as equality, because what we've done is we've taken the idea of equality and we've turned it into, religion first of all, but second of all is we've turned equality into this sort of ambiguous, what you say when you don't know what to say kind of thing, and. So whenever I'm talking about equality, like people say, well, why don't you believe in equality? I said, well, what's the conditions? Because the equality you're talking about right now happens in a vacuum. The one I'm talking about, it happens right here on planet Earth, and there are definitely some advantages and disadvantages that people have. And so the idea, I think, of sort of gender equality or racial equality or economic equality or let's attach equality to any like prefix, right? It's not that I don't think that it's a great idea. It's just simply untenable. So when somebody says, "Well, what do you mean by there's no such thing as equality?" So well, if I as a human 56-year-old male want to have a child right now and I want to bear it myself and give birth, I can't do that because it's physically impossible for me to do this. Oh, that's very unequal and unfair. I want to be more equal, right? Well, sorry, that's not going to happen for you. Okay, that's just one really stupid, over the top, exaggerated illustration of this, but it illustrates a point that there are certain conditions. What is the challenge of equality that you're saying, right? I'm not going to play power forward for the Knicks. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen in my lifetime, okay? That seems horribly unequal, right? When I listen to like Megan Rapinoe on the, the female soccer team, women's soccer team, right? Like talking about how they wanted equality and they wanted
I think it's easier to argue against egalitarianism when it comes to like the difference between men and women. But then, something like he brought up racial equality, that has to be something that's there. That's what we're doing over here, and this is where this reminds me of something when I graduated, like last quarter in university, and I had a professor and she said this thing that her professor said to her when she graduated that she was telling the class. And she said, I told you guys before, but she said that we don't live in a world of facts. We live in a world of very clever arguments. And at a certain point, like, what if someone made a very clever argument against racial equality? Well, okay, so are we going to give that up now and then change the law so there isn't racial equality? People could come up with very clever arguments, and I don't know. This is the thing that we're doing over here. You know what I mean? And it's like, it just seems like even what he's saying is that it is true. I don't want to pay him saying that about racial equality, but even between men and women, like, yes, they're different, but they are equal in the eyes of the law and in terms of having the opportunity to do things, or at least that's where we are now. And the chances of that changing are slim to none. So where do we go forward from here?
To be paid the same. Well, you're not playing in the same game as the guys that are as the men are.
It's one thing to be paid the same, or like the quality of outcome thing, that's a problem. But the opportunity, that's what people have fought to make the sort of hallmark of our culture at this point. And then we've done a good job of advertising that to the rest of the world and doing their best to make people want that also, or kind of disintegrating their society. And then they want to come here, and they're like, why does everybody want to come here? Well, it's because we've been rubbing it in everybody's face for so long. Oh yeah, I remember you mentioning that. It's a good saying. Yeah, I mentioned that probably like a couple months back or something like that, but it always sticks with me, you know what I mean? Because yeah, there are these very clever sophists out here. People can make very, very clever arguments. And I get it, like it would be hard to say something back, especially in the moment, but we do have to think about other implications like that, even if it is true, like, oh, you should always tell the truth, even if it hurts their feelings. Well, I don't know. I mean, what's your relationship with that person? You can be right, or you can get what you want,
Of course, what happens is actually,
and that's largely a lot of what Red Pill tells you on how to deal with women. It's like, you can be right, or you can get what you want. You could sit here and fail the shit test by trying to argue with her about something stupid, or you can because that's what the truth was, but then she doesn't want to, be with you anymore because she's not attracted to you now. Or you can pass it by making a joke out of it, and agree and amplify or ignoring it or whatever.
The female
Yeah,
team is getting paid
they're
more. They're
overpaid.
getting overpaid by rate of comparison, because of the market that they're in. The market that women's soccer is in, they're actually being paid more, like respectively, than the men are in men's soccer. And it takes an economist and an actuary to figure that stuff out. But when you see it in black and white, let's move on to the scroll. Keep scrolling,
Yeah.
But as far as equality is concerned, I would say, okay, do you believe in equality? Well, under what terms? Let's clarify this. Are we talking about women in sports? Are we talking equality in transgender athletes in same-sex sports? Is that the equality that we're talking about? Is it me giving birth? Is it because when you just throw out the word, well, everybody should be equal, you're getting into egalitarianism, and egalitarianism, as I said, is one of those isms, and it's an ideology. I make a distinction when you're talking about gynocentrism and you're talking about how things have become a little bit more feminine. I call it the feminine imperative in my books, but gynocentrism, because we have differing ideas when it comes to there are like terms and terminologies that are gendered terms. So like one of those is respect, and I have a point to this, but when one of those is respect, there's two. If you go and you look in the definition, the dictionary definition of the word respect, there's two definitions. One is the one we probably would think, well, what makes
Klaus says equality and getting drafted. Yeah, I mean, insofar as if they're taking jobs away from men and all the other benefits that they get, primarily the vote. I mean, that's really what that goes down to. Then yeah, there should be equality in being drafted. I mean, that's the experiment that we're running in this society. That's the deal. So then they should just do it properly. I always think about that, and I kind of like when I think about how they can reform it. I think they're just going to make women sign up for the selective service. But it's like, what if they had this thing where it's like you're a woman, you can choose to sign up for selective service, but you don't get the vote until you actually sign up for the selective service. Where men, it's, okay, men, you got to do it, whatever. Or if you have a child, then you can get the vote, basically, without having to sign up for selective service. I kind of give parity to birthing a child and then men having to, go to war through a draft. But, if you're 27, you don't have no kids, then yeah, maybe you should be on the draft also.
Makes you respectable. It's merit based. You have to have achieved something. You have to have done something for it, like you to respect a man. Okay, well, what have you done that makes you respectable? Why should I respect you? Right? Are you, whatever your accomplishments happen to be, whatever your body of work happens to be, that's a merit based hierarchical version of respect. That's the male version of respect. The second definition is everybody deserves respect. Everybody, it's common courtesy.
Kind of like human dignity.
Exactly. And everybody, you should treat everyone with respect. For the same word, those two definitions are diametrically opposed to each other. But yet, when somebody says, like, I think it was, they have a new minister of changing men's behavior in Australia right now.
Wow.
I should look into that. I wonder what their policies would be to change men's
just
behavior.
Made the news. Literally, there's a cabinet position for changing men's behavior, and I forget the guy's name.
I take it that's not equal enough.
As soon as I saw that, I found that guy's Twitter. I'm like, game on. So I went after this dude, because he was saying, well, we need to start by respecting men. Need to start by respecting women. I said, well, what definition of respect?
Oh God, that's just the same tradcon stuff we keep hearing. Men need the guts to marry these women.
Are we talking about? Are we talking about the hierarchical, or are we talking about
definition of woman?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So and then I try and explain the difference and the reason why there's gendered concepts. There's other gendered concepts, but respect is the easiest one because it relates to egalitarianism. So when we complain and we talk about how that we have this participation trophy generation, and it's like everybody gets to feel good about themselves, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose. It just means we all got to
very female coded.
That's very female. Well, because when we evolved from hunter gatherer,
what I kind of think about the everybody gets a trophy sort of culture that we have, and when I wonder what is it that really did that? Is it more ideology, or is it driven more so by profits? In the sense of if everybody gets a trophy, then people are more likely to sign up their kids for for this sport or whatever, right? Because they're going to go in there, they're going to go to the Disney World ride of playing soccer as a kid. They're going to get the trophy that you can put on the shelf so you can say you played soccer. Everybody's happy. You know, the league makes more money because they got more kids to sign up, and it's almost like selling a summer camp instead of actually trying to help kids get good at soccer or make great soccer players. It's just a kind of industry at that point. And it's more so us putting capitalism as a higher ideal than actually becoming good at something that leads to these outcomes.
Tribes, men were hierarchical because to be the chief, to be the best hunter, to be rewarded by women's attention and their sexual interest in you, you had to be better than the next guy. So guys are innately, naturally evolved to be more hierarchical. So when you see how men organize society,
I'm having trouble saying hierarchical. That's kind of what I had.
It's
earlier.
always hierarchical. There's like if you look at chain of command in the military, there's the general and there's the lieutenant and then there's a sergeant, and all down the chain of command to the private, right? If you look at like how we organize the workplace, there's the CEO, the CFO, the COO, all the way down until you get to the janitor, right? And for sports teams, you know, there's a captain of the team, yada yada. Men think in terms of hierarchy. Women.
Yo, Mark, welcome in, man. Great to see you in here. We got Mark in the building. RESPECT. Find out what it means to me. Welcome in, man. It's good to see you, bro.
Think in terms of the round. They're communitarian. Men are more interested in things. Women are more interested in people. Well, the reason for that is because women are the vulnerable sex. They're the ones who have to gestate the next, generation of kids. Eggs are expensive. Sperm is cheap. Men protect women because women are the vulnerable sex, right? Well, there's strength in numbers too. So if you have women in this it takes a village to raise a child, right? You've heard that. So you have this community, this communitarian society. So when women organize society, it's almost socialist, or like, for lack of a better term, socialist, communitarian. When men organize society, it's the general, the lieutenant, all the way down to the private, right? So it's organized hierarchically. Right now, I think one of the things that when you're talking about why is it, why do we have such a problem with all this stuff? Yeah, but what you're saying is because women have a different definition of what how we should organize society. Egalitarian, where respect means one for you and one for you and one for you, and oh, June, you're pregnant, so here's two for you, and then it's very communist, right? It's like from each's strengths to each's needs. I'm probably butchering
each according to his abilities
to each according to their needs, right? Yeah. And by the way, that concept, that's a Marxist concept. Yes. That Marxist concept has filtered into our marriage, right? Into what we think of marriage, right? 50-50 marriages, everything.
No fault.
Never.
Mr. Pitt says, everyone gets a trophy. Might have been driven by a highly feminized education system. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's probably two aspects to that, not just about the money. I'm sure the money part helped to probably enable that. Maybe that's not even the case, but there's definitely the feminized education system in the sense of girls can do what men can do. So everybody gets a trophy, because if the girls never win a match, how the hell else are they going to get a trophy, especially if they're playing against the boys? That makes more sense.
Never call your wife or your husband your partner, like in front of Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh
or me,
or me. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Jedediah Bila, but I've been working with Jed for a while. One of the first interviews we ever had, she started referring to her husband as her partner. I go, stop. And she's like, what? I said, you just referred to Jeremy as his name. I said, you just referred to Jeremy as your partner. I said, that's your husband.
There's a gender neutralization going on.
That's an interesting conversation. I like Coach's breakdown on that, and he said that like the term partner came out of the LGBTQ community, and that's something that's been exported into everybody else's relationship from that, especially as we get into non-traditional relationship roles, where you see things like polyamory or whatever it is. There needs to be a new set of terms when people play different roles in that.
Even within the language. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed this even during my relatively short life. Mm-hmm. Like 20 plus years ago, if a guy said his partner, that was code that he was gay.
I just did that. Bro, I told you about my partner Mike.
Yeah.
And I go, my business.
Hate to say it, but I feel like these guys listen to Coach's episode, because I never heard anybody mention that about partner, at least not recently. And then Coach talked about it like 3 weeks ago or something.
This partner
Yeah,
Mike.
it always used to be the subtle but not so subtle way
Of saying you're homosexual.
A same-sex person, someone who's attracted to the same sex, referencing their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. They'd say, oh, my partner, and everyone would kind of subtly know, oh, okay.
Yo, Trevor, man, welcome in. Good to see you, bro. We got Trevor and Robert Spencer in here. Victoria MP Tim Richardson serves as inaugural parliamentary secretary for men's behavior change, focuses on the influence the internet and social media have on boys and men's attitudes towards women. Man, yeah, see, and that's where the demonization is going to come in, and they're going to come after a lot of channels and get rid of a lot of things. Just reminds me of the divert hate campaign they got going on over here. And just, a lot of people's channels being shadow banned and stuff like that. But like this whole Andrew Tate thing and these I'm sure he did it, by the way. That, like, the media is going to love that to push in stuff like this, because then it suddenly becomes justified because of the radicalization of these young men from these horrible influencers.
And then I noticed a shift in the last 15 years, particularly last 10, where I started noticing straight people starting to use that term, even if they're married.
By the way, homosexual people are mad at the heterosexual people for taking their word.
That's I'm not surprised. And so I'm like, that's strange. No one used to guys didn't used to call their wives their partner. Women didn't used to call their husbands their partner. Like, there's a very specific word already that exists for that. So why are we going to the less specific, more nebulous term where that could mean anything from your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, spouse, business partner, friend? Like, it's all the same word.
Well, it's because in a female-centric and a gynocentric social order, and a lot of the things that I think that people complain about today as being woke are really much more feminine than they are really woke. And by that I mean organizing a society for the female psyche is done in the round, okay? So if everybody is equal, then we should stop referring to each other as man and woman. We should start saying comrade, I guess, I don't know, but like we should start referring to, instead of husband and wife, we say partner.
Person. I've noticed people, I've noticed that one as well. My person. I'm just looking for my person.
It's supposed to be gender neutral, but I'll tell you the thing is like when it comes to the English language, you just take out any word that has the consecutive letters of MAN in it, and then instead of fireman, it's fire person, or mail carrier instead of mailman.
But they're doing it now that actresses, waitresses. Now, no, it's actor. They're all actors.
Right. Yeah.
They're all waiters.
That is the masculine. You realize that, right?
On the plane,
so
used to say.
So it's okay to be masculine if you're an actor.
Yeah. They don't say stewardess anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like flight attendant.
Yeah. So I've noticed, like, from the 90s.
That's interesting. I didn't even notice that about the. That's true. There are so many different terms that have been, I guess, X'd out. Flight attendant's a good one.
Till now, I'm like, why is everything being gender neutralized? Like, what is wrong with?
Because they want to remove the man. Because honestly, I think it originally started because there was this, smash the patriarchy. So what do? There's I believe it was in the book 1984, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but George Orwell said, if thought corrupts language, then language can corrupt thought. And so if people have asked me this before, they say like, well, what can we do, Rollo? How can we fight back? You can stop using their language. Yeah. Stop using and I make very, very distinct differences between us and them, and I do this deliberately in some of my writing, where I say stop using their language and start using our language. Use the language of empiricism. They're using the language of emotionalism. Remember, we were talking about empiricism, or objective reality and truth versus emotionalism. There's a language of emotionalism, and there's a language for empiricism. So when somebody will not, what was the meme where the guy was at the liquor store and he was transgender? He goes, "It's ma'am." If you go, "No, it's sir," and if you insist on using, because what it is if thought can corrupt language, and language can corrupt thought. So what it is it's a war of emotionalism versus rationalism. And so if you concede to use their language, that's dragging you that much more over. And you know what? If you keep doing that, your kids will start using those terms, and your kids will start using those terms anything can become normal.
I'm so glad you're making this point. I was actually at
Mr. Pitt says, I heard Rollo mention the partner thing on his Sunday show over a year ago. Oh, okay. Well, then it must just be more well known, and I just didn't catch it. So, thank you for pointing that out.
A conservative Christian conference about 2 years ago, and so people were discussing. It was a very politically charged event, and people were, most of the people at the table were parents, and they were discussing some of the things going on in their children's schools and what they're learning, and they're railing on all of these things. And I noticed one of the women who was going hardest on it all, she was respecting preferred pronouns as she was ranting. And I put out my hand and I was like, you should stop doing that. Because number one, it's actually really hard to know what you're saying, because if you're talking about a man and you keep saying she, it's confusing to people because
birthing people versus
because
women.
I don't know if you're talking about a male or a female. Like it's really hard to track the conversation. But also, if you concede that this man who's not even in the room, so you can't even say, "Oh, I'm trying to be polite." This person's not even here, and you keep referring to him as a she, then you're just undermining your own. You're undermining your own argument. You're accepting their premise.
That's a tough place to be because it depends what the context is. If you're at work and you do that, you might end up in HR and then lose your job. It reminds me in child support. I remember when the pronoun thing kind of got big, and I was working there, and they adjusted our system where all the cases are, and we access it on our computers to. You can click on everybody's like personal profile, then you can click on cases. But on the personal profile, they added a box. Was it a box, or they put some section or where you can add the person's preferred pronoun, but the tough part about it was obviously it's like, since it's dealing with child support, you have to deal with very real children being born from a man and a woman. It was more just like there could be these tough conversations you'd have to have with them, because there were even people trying to get out of it by identifying as the other gender and saying, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Like as maybe a kind of sneaky way to get out of child support, or just not admit that they are who we're looking for. So we had to try to get like other identifiers out of them, social security number and stuff like that would pin it down pretty well. But, if we didn't say their preferred pronoun, that can get us in trouble.
That a man can be a woman, or that
At
sex
least
and gender
tacitly.
Or
Yes.
you're tacitly accepting it, and now you're sort of standing on one foot, and it's very easy to push you now because they've already corrupted your own language and your own way of thinking. So just by making that concession, as well as some of these other ones, you are kind of ensuring you're still going to lose. You're kind of slightly slowing the loss, but you're still going to lose because you're unwilling to just say what it is.
That's why I keep saying, like, if you are...
I'm interested to what he's going to say about marriage. If this gets a little long, I might even just skip it there. But, him saying don't use their preferred pronoun is a kind of a prescription, and is a him giving advice moment. You know what I mean? On that. And, of course, no problem with that. But I wonder what he'll say about marriage. I'm sure it'll be a little bit more subtle.
Sika, if you want to do something about this, you have to stop using their language. And if that means like misgendering them, then that's what that means. Sorry, but you're going to have to misgender them.
That's so interesting. Because even the term misgender, I would say by calling a man a she, you are misgendering them.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
a man is a he.
Empirically, that is true.
Even the term misgender is coded.
Yes,
right. There's like a left-wing version of misgendering, which is not calling them by what they want to be called. Right. Whereas I would say misgendering actually means using.
Dang, I almost want to put a poll out on the chat, but I don't know how to do that. Start a poll. Ask a question. I'm gonna ask misgender or not misgender. Let's see. How about use their preferred pronoun or not? Or not? Question mark. Yes, no. So hit yes if you would use their preferred pronoun, hit no if you won't. We'll do our first poll in the chat, and then maybe we can see what the votes are. I'll be honest, if someone's like, hey, do this, then I would probably just say, all right, yeah, whatever. You know, again, you can be right or you can get what you want. You know what I mean? And depending on what my relationship with them is, like if it's honestly, if I had a kid and they came in there with that, in that situation, I don't think I'd be able to. But if I'm at work and I'm working, you know, my child support job and a customer comes in or client comes in and it's just like, all right, you know, sure, whatever you say. On marriage, Rollo will say that he's not against marriage, but he is against how marriage is done today. I have heard that from him. So we'll see if he says anything, adds more to that today. I'm sure he's done whole streams on it. But yeah, that is a perfect Rollo-ism right there.
Biologically incorrect pronouns.
Yeah.
But people have again conceded that one to the idea that misgendering is calling.
Well, what they're doing is they're pandering to it. And I will tell you this is, if there is a war between the speaking the emotional language versus the empirical language, if you insist on speaking only the language of empiricism. By the way, the language of empiricism always sounds like hate to language. It does, because you're not following along with the program. You're not doing that's where shame comes in. Or you're going to be on the wrong side of history. There's no heaven. There's only the wrong side of history. Yeah, just saying. But so the emotional side. Really, what will they do is, like, if you make I've done this several times on God knows how many different podcasts, but if you start making a really good empirical argument about something that people are very emotionally invested in, they have their egos invested in that emotional, and they got no counter argument, that's when they go, who hurt you?
Yep.
Well, what was your family life like? Now they turn into, like, armchair psychologists.
Yeah, or you're just an incel or something like that.
Or have you ever been in love? You need to touch grass. all those. I know we laugh at it. But it's funny because what they're doing is they're trying to reframe that argument from an empirical argument into an emotional argument. And if you bite, you're done. Yeah. That's it. You're dead. Yeah. But the emotionalism versus empiricism. When you stick to your guns and you don't bite on, who hurt you, and you say, no, this is the truth. What do you like? I'm going to rope-a-dope, bring him back into the ring, right? Say, I want you to tell me what a woman is, right? Because when you do that, you force them to have some insight about themselves and their own identity and that ego investment. That is a false ego investment. You are actually helping them by not pandering to them. It's tough love. And you might go to jail for it, for misgendering somebody, but maybe that's the price you have to pay to say, look, this person is speaking crazy talk. Like, this is, you want me to agree with you because it will feel better for you, but I know what the truth is here. I did it's like 3 years ago, I did an interview with Michaela Peterson.
And there has to be something said to be right or get what you want. Like, I can understand, like, I guess me working at child support, I can understand doing that because we're trying to get them to pay or whatever. But then it's like, in your own life, there are certain points where it doesn't matter ultimately, like outcome independence or an abundance mentality, and sort of kowtowing to it would diminish, like, attraction, you can say. Or it's like people throwing that at you as a kind of shit test. You know how they say, like, feminism is a societal shit test that everyone's failing? Kind of reminds me of that.
Okay, yeah.
And
I think I saw that.
I think after she was interviewing with Chris Williamson right after that, and she says, I interviewed with Rollo and everything, and he made some good points. She says, but I didn't feel really good after that. And I'm like, I'm doing my job right, awesome, because I don't care. That's not the point. I'm not here to make you feel good at the end of the thing. I want to educate you. I want to wake people up.
Do you think
comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable?
Do you think that's why there are people out there who just run with the idea that you just hate women?
Oh, they always do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's because the language of empiricism will always sound like hate to the language of emotionalism. So the people who want to say, oh, Rollo just hates women, or those red pill guys, meaning me, but those red pill guys. Those red pill guys, they hate women. It's like, no, we don't hate, like, the red pill, it doesn't exist so that men will hate women. It exists so that men won't hate women for what they can never be to those guys. It's a form of education. It's I look at it this way: the red pill is like fire. Okay, you can use that fire to heat your home, cook your food, do whatever do something beneficial to yourself, or you can use it to set yourself on fire and set your neighbor on fire and set the neighborhood on fire and set his house on fire as well. That's all an application, and that's where people really they think that because it can be used for manipulative, selfish purposes, that therefore it must be a net negative to society because it should be whatever I say it should be. No.
That's an interesting point too. It reminds me of if you guys remember Socrates in ancient Athens. And as you guys probably know, what happens to Socrates is that he ends up being sentenced to death because they make him drink hemlock poison, and that's the end of that. But the charges they brought up against him was corrupting the youth and impiety, which means basically attacking the religion, I believe, or attacking their religious beliefs, not being pious. And he in his there's a book called The Apology, written by Plato, where Socrates gives his the word apology is also changed. We talked about the value flip in the last stream, but it's not like I'm sorry. It's like, no, hold on, let me defend myself. That's an apology. So in his apology, he explains, he defends himself, and he puts forth a argument of why they're accusing him of corrupting the youth and impiety. And he's like, well, am I really doing that? And he uses his characteristic philosophical, style in order to argue against that and in fact prove that they're wrong. But they all still pretty much vote to exile him. And he doesn't want to be exiled from Athens because he loves living there, and that's such a part of his identity. The only other option is for him to drink poison. And that's the end of Socrates. And when Rollo gives this sort of fire argument, you know what I mean? It's like, you could say truth or being honest all the time is kind of like fire also. And it can help you in your own life, maybe just for your own personal understanding, or maybe for people that are close to you in some way. Or if you keep bothering the order of things, it can end up with you having to drink hemlock or being banished from your home because people are tired of you going out there questioning everybody's ideals and their beliefs and crashing everybody's worldviews all the time.
It is what it is. It's all just whether it's pro-social or anti-social is all in the application.
Yeah. I find that in our society, and again, I think this is because the overall culture has been so heavily feminized into this emotionalism. It's like there are ideas and knowledge and facts and data and statistics that exist that you're supposed to pretend that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone even dares talk about them again, it's drawn back into the emotionalism. It's drawn back into some type of hatred, or you are anti this, or you are anti that, because you're even just talking about the thing.
Well, it's part of the denial part. Like I said, when people are faced with reality, that really sort of shatters their ego investments, you have two choices. You can either go into denial, or you can accept it, analyze yourself, and then change yourself as a result of that. Most people don't want to change themselves. Yeah. So it's easier. Actually, the easier path is to go into denial. Denial can take all kinds of different forms, such as you hate women. Who hurt you? Go touch grass. Have you ever been in love? That kind of stuff.
I think there's also, what also happens, particularly online, is the truth is not everyone is sophisticated. You're a sophisticated guy, okay? So you can talk about
not to
these
hear my haters
issues.
say it, but
yeah,
okay.
you are. You're sophisticated, right? So you can practice a broad range of cognitive tasks and skills.
Multitasking.
Over the course of time, well, not even just multitasking, but I've learned, particularly through the internet, that not everyone is intellectually equipped for every form of thinking. There are some people who can't deal in hypotheticals.
Oh yeah.
If
it just kind of reminds me of just like dealing with the mob. And there's another Plato analogy here of the cave. You guys are probably familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave. But to give you the short version, there's a bunch of prisoners and they're in a dark cave and they're looking at a light on the wall that's lit from a flame behind them, and they can't move. Everything's fastened and they can just see the wall. And sometimes, whoever the controllers are just walk like a vase or any kind of object in front of the flame, and it projects a shadow onto the wall. So the prisoners all have their theories and ideas about the shadows on the wall until one day, a prisoner is unshackled and let out of the cave, and he sees reality for what it is. But when he comes back and he tries to explain to the prisoners what the shadows really are, they get angry at him. And not just because he's telling them the truth. In fact, he looks stupid to them because these prisoners have no conception of seeing outside of the cave. So they're like, this guy is nuts. And they all just basically are like, we should execute this guy, or that's what should happen to him. Basically what happened to Socrates. And when it comes to things like Twitter and the internet and stuff like that, people are used to seeing the shadows on the wall. And, you know, there are people who are just very good at getting the mob to do what they want it to do, even though it you know, if you're this philosopher type and you're trying to tell them exactly what it is, they might even just hate you for it.
It's not literal. They can't wrap their head around it. Like, I didn't used to think this was true, but I've come
I'm
across
remembering
it
a
so
tweet
many
you
times.
just put out just recently.
Yeah, there are people who they don't understand hypotheticals. There's people who don't understand abstraction and analogy. There are people who don't understand that something can be generally true whilst not applying to them.
Or two things can be true at the same time.
Or two things can be true at once. Or just because something's not at this extreme, it doesn't have to be at that other extreme. There's a lot of middle ground.
Was it sorry, well,
go ahead.
Was it you that said, like, if you put out a tweet that says, I like pancakes?
No, mine was.
Why do you hate waffles?
Yeah, mine was actually mangoes. I think it was mangoes.
Yeah.
I was
Why
like,
do you hate waffles?
yeah.
I didn't say anything about waffles.
I think my most liked tweet of all time. I think it got over 250,000 likes. It was like how Twitter works. Me, I like mangoes.
Yeah.
People, you know. I can't
Why do you
believe
hate
you know.
strawberries?
Why you can't believe you hate strawberries? You forgot to mention kiwis.
Yes,
Go and
yes.
educate yourself.
Yes.
You bigot.
Yeah.
You fruit phobic.
Yeah, just like a conservative to come down on mangoes. Exactly.
I was like, hey, man.
like just to say anything. Well, I'll tell you what's funny is I can remember I was discussing this with my wife. My wife actually came up with this one. She's
I think I'll do is I'll skip it to marriage. We'll watch the marriage section, and then I'm going to pull up the Red Pill University Whisper interview, and we'll hear about the origin of the Red Pill subreddit. Just because some of this stuff is getting a little bland. Let's see, Department of Education. Let's see. Uh-oh.
Yeah, or mobile phone. They're more likely to read the stipulations and the fine print of that than they will understand what they're getting into when it comes to marriage. And that's just the legalities of it. Then there's the personal stuff, because who you marry and who you decide to have children with is going to not only affect your family, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father. You're basically bringing two families together. And when my daughter got married last year in August, thank you. And he came to me and asked me for permission to marry her, which, honestly, it was nice. Don't get me wrong, but it's a formality, right? Yeah. And I said, you're asking me, do you know what you're asking me? And he's like, no, I just figured it would be good, proper, good etiquette or something. Okay, so here's what you're asking me. You're asking me to blend my family with yours. Yeah. That's what it's really about. Because every decision that you make together with my daughter is going to affect me and my wife and my dogs and your family as well. And guess what? When those kids are adults and I have great-grandchildren, or I have God forbid, you have great-grandchildren, right? That's going to affect it's a ripple effect, right? So it's not just about you and my daughter. It's about everyone in that concentric circle that is in that ripple effect.
People have lost track of that.
People don't think about it.
You know, man, that's something I think about a lot, especially with child support. And so many people have kids. Like, the benefit of marriage is having the kids within this sort of intentionally. Like, for me, there's two ways you can have a kid. There's unintentionally, and then there's intentionally. And if you have a kid intentionally, then that's good. It means you probably thought about all this stuff with family. Everybody knows you guys are probably together, and people are waiting to accept this child into the greater group. Unintentionally is a problem, because you might have expectations, she might have expectations, then suddenly birth control fails and she's pregnant, and you want her to get an abortion, she doesn't want to, or maybe she said she's pro-abortion 6 months ago, but now that she's pregnant, she's had a change of heart. And now your expectations and her expectations are clashing, and now you're unintentionally having a kid, and it's going to have these ripple effects on the family. And the benefit of marriage is supposed to be that you guys get married, everybody comes, watches the ceremony, witnesses it. Everybody's like, okay, these two are a thing. You know, kids are probably going to come out of this, and we're all acknowledging this, and there's nothing strange or weird or surprising about that. And there's this kind of symbolic layer and meaning put on that. But when it's unintentionally, you know, I almost think that's why boyfriend and girlfriend exists as a relationship status in our society. It's to say that, like, well, in case she gets pregnant, it's with this guy. We all kind of knew that was his girlfriend. But if they don't, or they didn't want, you know what I mean? Like, you just come home one day and you're like, Mom, Dad, you're going to be a grandpa, or Mom, you're going to be a grandma. What? Oh, you got somebody pregnant? Really? Who? Oh my God. You didn't even want that? Like, that could be a freaking nightmare. But, you know, of course, the problem is they made doing it the right way so freaking painful also, that guys are just like, what the heck? You know what I mean? Just buy gold and bury it somewhere and don't tell anyone. Yeah. Or just buy a bunch of Bitcoin and have it on a cold wallet somewhere. And yeah.
That they think about, I'm going to lose half my stuff. These guys are...
Man, that's one thing I should probably talk to you guys about, is how child support sees income and what realistically information they actually have porting in that system. That there's like another story behind child support really is big data. The way child support has this much power and is able to do things so efficiently is because they have so much data. Your social security number is just linked to so many different databases. And when the case comes across into our system and the social security number gets put in, after a few days, it just cross-references all these databases, whether it's National Directory of New Hires, Employment Development Department, just all these different things, addresses, phone numbers, bank accounts, different names or aliases. And the caseworker sees all this past income going back quarters for years, past employers. We see all that stuff. You know what I mean? So a lot of people might have strategies for how to hide things or whatever, but it's not going to happen. And we see all these past phone numbers. Really, you do got to bury gold somewhere and not tell anybody about it. Do you know about Monero stealth coins? You know, I actually don't. I remember when Monero came out, but like my crypto knowledge is probably centered from like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Classic, Ethereum, and then watching some of the meme coins go up. But I never got into like Monero. Ripple was like the latest one I remember in terms of like something special about it. Well, they called it Ripple. It was XRP. But yeah, I used to look around, but I remember Monero, but I never like researched it or studied about
afraid
it.
of losing half their stuff. No, they're worried about that damn Ripple effect.
What he says Ripple. That's kind of interesting. Was Monero the one where if you do a transaction, it does something so where you can't trace it back or something?
Is what they're worried about. That. They're all because it's not just financial investments, it's emotional investments as well. When I talk to guys who are coming out of divorces at 45, which is the prime demographic for male suicide, it is also men who are the average age of first divorce is 45 years old. Mm. And when men go through divorce for the first time, they're 8 times more likely to take their own lives.
Yes.
Okay. So when I'm dealing with these guys, that's a consequence that I don't hear TradCons or anybody else saying, well, that's half their stuff. But what about the guy who's going to off himself at 45 because he got into a situation that he should have thought about earlier?
A lot of people, and I see this very much from both quote-unquote sides, people really don't give a crap about a lot of men's problems.
Oh, no, of course not.
And they really like the...
You know why that is? Because we have a burden of performance, and to make us respectable, we can't complain.
Yeah, I get that, but I just find it remarkable when, no matter the situation, there's a reflex to blame it on the man.
Yeah.
And there's many things that should be blamed on the man or blamed on men in general, right? Men F up a lot. Mm-hmm. But...
Monero is what most people think Bitcoin is. The problem with Bitcoin is that all of it is on the blockchain. Yeah, okay. I know that about the ledger and cross-referencing. And there's KYC know your customer requirements for crypto exchanges. Dude, I remember when the know your customer requirements came in for crypto, because back then you can have like a Coinbase or there was GDAX. One second, I got my cat crying right outside the door and I'm sick of hearing it. I'm just gonna let her in. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. She was up there crying for like 30 minutes. But, dude, I remember when the Know Your Customer requirements came. And there was an issue with Binance for that, too, because Binance was Chinese owned. And I don't know what they ended up doing with Binance at that point. But it was like, it was a choice. You know, you can either do the Know Your Customer stuff or you can put it on like a cold wallet. What do they call those little, I can't even remember the name of it. Oh, dang. The Nano Ledgers. The Nano Ledger S. Yeah, so all the American stuff at this point has the KYC. But the thing is with Monero, it's like I don't understand how you would buy it or cash it back into cash without having to run it through an exchange anyways. You know what I mean? Like that's the tough part. So I don't know how Monero can actually solve that. Monero, let's see. Monero is what people use in the dark to truly, oh my God, that's some dark web stuff right there, huh? To truly buy organs, oh man. And all the other, because you can't trace it. Dang, that's crazy. Yo, dude, thank you so much, bro. I appreciate the support. We got Australian dollars in the house now. Hey, Shah, sorry for arriving late. Just noticed you may as well be in the same podcast studio with your purple backdrop. Why purple? Favorite color? Man, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it just looked aesthetically pleasing to me. Purple, I always did like purple. I like maroons or something of a kind of purple tinge to it. It is kind of my favorite. I mean, there is some sort of, you can almost say, symbolic, things about purple. Purple used to be hard to make back in ancient times, and then purple was reserved for kings too. Not saying that, but it was a very well-respected color, and there are symbolisms associated with it. It does seem kind of like purple pillish in the sense of, someone that's kind of in between. And that's what, when I saw there, is the purple kind of gave me that idea also. I just think it looks nice, and it contrasts nicely with the gold. Now, purple and gold has its own symbolic associations also. But yeah, I just thought it really is just I just think it looks good kind of deal. So I wish I could give you a better story there, but again, thank you for the donation.
It's like a reflex. If the woman, it turns out the woman cheated on him, well, what did he do wrong? Why did he make her do that? Right?
Yeah,
if the man cheats, obviously that's his problem.
He's wrong. If she cheats, what did you do wrong to make her cheat?
Yeah, I just find like there's this knee jerk to always take it off the woman and put it back on the man. And I would...
That's going to be the gynocentrism, and that's also the TradCon stuff that we saw in our Doug Wilson interview with that other guy, Michael Foster.
Somehow accept that if we lived in a more traditional society. If we did live in this traditional culture and we were not in this weird fake egalitarian world, and it was like, okay, yeah, we all agree the man is the head of the family, the man is responsible, the man is the leader, come hell or high water, then I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But
yeah, and there's actual protections for you in marriage if the other person doesn't kind of hold up their end of the deal. Instead, we're all just shooting in the dark.
It's like people play this game where they flip-flop between the egalitarianism and the feminism and the traditionalism and the chivalry.
They want
conditional femininity, conditional masculinity.
They want 20th century perks within 21st century.
That's the cherry picking. You remember when we reacted to that one YouTuber, Manifestel, and she literally said that was the strategy. It's about taking what's best from traditionalism, feminism, and everything else to get what they want.
21st century perks with 20th century traditionalism.
Great way to put it.
So here's my biggest gripe with traditional conservatives right now is their solution to all the men's problems, as you were just saying here, is be more responsible. Take on more responsibility. I'll hear Jordan Peterson say this. I'll hear Mark Driscoll say this. I'll see all these people who are like sort of dyed-in-the-wool conservatives say, well, the world will be a better place. Men just need to man up and they need to take more responsibility. The problem is they don't have the authority to exercise that responsibility. So if you're going to, if the men have like 100% responsibility and 0% authority, that is the definition of slavery, is what that is.
Michael R says, say no to pronouns. LOL. Hope you're well, Shah. I'll catch the replay. Much love. Yo, thank you, man. Great seeing you in here. Say no to the pronouns. Looking at the poll so far, we got 89% are on the no side. So, yeah. I mean, I hear that. You know what I mean? I will maintain that, you know, it's context dependent at work, whatever, you know, but at home, probably going to be different. But, you know, I understand what he's saying. Like, the minute you let them take over the language, then it just kind of walks you down this alley, you know, like people want to get you to walk down a dark road with them. And sometimes before you know it, you're well down that dark road and way further down by yourself and uncomfortable than you thought you were going to be. And, you know, that could be one of those situations. She is being bad. All right, off.
The opposite, of course, is 100% authority and 0% responsibility. That's tyranny.
Yes.
Okay. As it stands in a gynocentric social order, we expect the panacea, like the solution to all problems, is men just take on more responsibility. But the problem is if you can't give them a commensurate level of authority to exercise what they need to meet those responsibilities, all you're doing is just piling more and more liability and accountability and responsibility on these guys, and they're toothless. They're doing it with their hands tied behind their backs, because the 50-50%, the egalitarian side of things, those perks negate that authority. So when we start talking about like gynocentrism and feminism, or we talk about what would be called androcentrism or patriarchy, right? The buzz term for the late 60s, early 70s, like militant feminism, was smash the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy is a more balanced system than feminism or gynocentrism. And the reason for that is because under a idealized patriarchy, I'm not saying corrupt, but under an ideal patriarchy, a man has responsibilities to be responsible for his children.
Yes.
We saw when we see a single mother and her child goes out and commits a criminal act or commits suicide or has a drug problem or whatever else, we go, "Where's the father?"
Yep.
That's 20th century. There's no father. You said a woman can do exactly. We're all the same. We're all equal. Men and women are just the same. Blank slate. So why would that make any difference? Well, it does, because there's something in our brain, something in our subconscious, something in our genetics, the way we're wired, is to say, "Where's the man in all of this?"
Yes.
Right?
See, you know, this is the tough part, and I agree with him, especially about not being given the authority to do all the stuff that they're expecting in the marriage, and they're living with one foot in and one foot out, and he's kind of using what I guess you could say is evolutionary biology to say almost the same thing that tradcons use religion to justify, which is that, you know, he's kind of saying naturally it should be a patriarchy, which almost, you know, tradcons would kind of say that. I feel like he's saying something similar. I don't want to, maybe I'm mischaracterizing him. You know what I mean? But the question is that scenario truly something we can actually go back to, you know, in a way that doesn't involve a complete regression of, or collapse of society followed by having to build things back up? Because if things are going to remain this way, then even if evolutionary biology says that, and even if religion says that, but it's not actually coming back, then, you know, we're still left trying to figure out what to do next. I always maintain that technology is the X factor in all this stuff. And so long as the economy runs in this new way that it's running, instead of going back to, you know, some sort of agrarian living that most of us used to do, then saying, well, it should be patriarchal or that's better, it might not actually work or be possible. It just seems like in that sense, he's almost suggesting what the tradcons say. But let's see if he says anything different from it.
And the reason why we blame men for a lot of things for being irresponsible is because our innate evolved firmware wants to look for a responsible adult male to come in and take care of this situation. But because the emotionalism has led us all to play the same game and to pander to this idea that it feels better if we say men and women are exactly the same, and a woman can be just as good a father as she can be a mother at the same time and be superwoman about it, then that shouldn't make any difference. But it does to our psyches. It makes a difference, and the reason for that is because patriarchy we expect responsibility from that guy under patriarchy. But patriarchy also says, but you have the authority to do that. And if you're going to be responsible for your family, responsible for your wife, and responsible for your kids, and if they commit a criminal act, you've committed a criminal act. That's the way it used to be, especially under like coverture laws. Like a man was responsible for his wife and his kids, and if his wife killed somebody or his wife,
he'd go to jail.
He would go to jail because he was responsible for that, because he
or have to pay off her debt.
Also had the responsibility to use and exercise the authority that patriarchy granted him to keep her in line and to keep his kids in line. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be this tyrannical, abusive son of a bitch. It means he's going to use that, exercise that as, what they will call beneficent sexism, benevolent patriarchy, right? And what we have right now is we have 100% responsibility for men and 0% authority to exercise that responsibility. Until traditional conservatives are willing to have that argument or have that conversation or talk about, you want to solve the problem, it begins there. Not just take more responsibility, be man up, be a better man.
But people won't, because they've still got the feminist indoctrination.
Yeah,
I'm glad he calls out self-improvement there. I got to give him credit for that, because what he's saying is completely true. If they're not discussing giving men the authority, I tend to look at it as more of a pessimist side, in the sense of men probably aren't getting that. So what I would at least like to see is an equal contract, because I don't really see, women's rights changing or anything like that, or men being given this kind of preferential thing, because they had a discussion about equality earlier. But if they have that conversation, maybe they can realize they actually can't bring that back. But that's kind of answering why they won't have that conversation, because the minute they do, how do they admit that, yes, we can't go back to that, and that is the objective reality we're living in? Because then again, their identity crashes. The world view that they have takes a huge hit. And that's kind of why they don't want to have that. Christian says, why, when tradcons talk about patriarchy, it's laughable. No one should be talking about patriarchy besides the real G's, aka the Taliban. Man, I mean, yeah. And, I was just like reading about like how custody works. And this isn't Afghanistan, but in Pakistan, and it's like, if you get divorced, the kid, if it's a son, the son will stay with the mom till 7, and then comes you as the father. You can say, all right, come with me now. No questions asked, really, unless there really is a good reason. And if it's a daughter, it's like when she reaches puberty, she should live in the father's house, or it's his authority to take it. There's no custody battle in that sense. And that's really because he's responsible for those kids. And if something happens and those kids do something bad, no one's going to look at the mom and say, why did this happen? They're all going to look at dad. It's like natural. I remember being a kid doing something bad, at the mosque, or getting in trouble, like, where's your father? Like, literally the first question. And, if I did something bad, I'd go talk to dad, and then I'd get what's coming to me, my discipline, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's just naturally the way it is, And I saw an interesting post today on Twitter of someone literally talking about that, and they're like, the Taliban made it safer for women over there. They don't have rights, in the sense of what the West values. But yeah, and you're right, though, because it's like, if we're going to go back to that style of a patriarchy, then it might as well be something similar to their system. And our culture and the way we sell ourselves as a culture is about freedom and all these kinds of things. So unless you're going to get rid of all these things, there's probably a very low chance it's actually coming back. So then if that's the case, where do we go from here? Which is really what should be getting discussed, and you can say evolutionary biology says men and women should have these roles, but the fact is that women don't want to be in that role, and they're not living in that role. They're choosing not to. So the more men try to live in that role, it just enables them. It just finances them. It just finances feminism, essentially, because they can use you as a bigger utility value, which is why MGTOW is having the single greatest effect on all of this right now.
Exactly. And again, as I said, everybody born after 1965.
Yeah, even speaking in those terms, you are just opening yourself up to be called, at the lightest, you'll be called insecure and misogynist. At the worst, you'll be called, I don't even know, like even talking in those terms or even saying that patriarchy is a positive thing. And this has even infected churches
Oh, yeah.
massively. I mean, you wrote a book on this, right? But that idea, it is frustrating. And the thing I find really fascinating with it as well is it's actually making everyone less happy.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm seeing all of the.
That's an interesting question too. Is it making everyone less happy, or is it just this? Because we live in a kind of gray area world. We live in this halfway world between traditionalism and halfway through progressivism. If it was fully traditional and we all had a lane, we'd probably be happier. If it was fully progressive and there was actually true equality, not just, gynocentric equality as they sell it, maybe we'd even be happier. But the real problem is this kind of friction and grinding that exists between these two paradigms. And we unfortunately haven't made it to one or the other yet.
These women, 20 to 40, especially, right, whether they're posting TikToks.
And, part of that is it's hard for men to say we're victims. You know what I mean? Because men are so conditioned by traditional masculinity to admit when something is unfair against them or they're actually a victim of something, because they're trained to say, well, it's your fault. You need to just work harder. It's almost like none of the people want to admit that, especially on the influencer side, because they don't want to be seen as less manly. So it really is a question of what is masculinity going to look like in the future. And there's this war for masculinity. There's the tradcons trying to define what masculinity is. There's progressives trying to define what masculinity is, which ironically both involve men just being a utility for women and not having any authority. Then there's red pillars and everybody else trying to figure out, okay, well, what does masculinity look like going forward? What does a prince look like when the princess doesn't want to be saved? Well, what does he do? Yo, Will, welcome in, man. Good to see you, bro. It looks like the poll's been no is at 73%, so it went from 89 to 73%. I use the right pronoun if their look is on point. I could see that. So if they identify in a way and they actually look like the thing they're identifying as, then yeah, okay, yeah, you'd use the pronoun. I could see that. I can't remember where I read this, but I read somewhere like in Iran, like the government, like in Iran of all places, you wouldn't expect this, but the government will sponsor a transition surgery or whatever, and they do that more so just to get someone into the role instead of just having someone, out in the open, not fully transitioned or not. But it was interesting to learn that. But yeah, if they look like the part, then it'd be easier to just use the pronoun because that's what they're going for.
Crying in their car, or you're just having private conversations with people and they're speaking very honestly and they're talking about how hard it is to find, a good man and a righteous man and, husband material. Meanwhile, you talk to guys. You have a messed up society when you have all of these men who are saying how hard it is to find a decent woman and to find a wife, and you have all of these women who are saying how hard it is to find a decent man and to find a potential husband. And logically, you would think, okay, this should be quite easy to solve, right? We bring that group together with that group. And, some of it is expectations. I think a lot of it is.
I think expectations is a good point. I put it in the stream on Thursday. Maybe I'll put it again if I have it. But I was rewatching earlier the Rick Roderick lecture on YouTube about John Baudrillard, and where he talks about the hyperreal, and if you guys have a chance, damn, I'd even like to react to it online just because I think it's that good. Dang, my internet's going really slow. John Rick Roderick. I just want to put it in just in case you guys want to watch it later. But this concept of hyperreal, of something being more real than real, I had this realization that people are suffering from that in dating because they're looking for a partner that doesn't exist. There's the, oh shoot, I put it in the wrong one. There is the oh, there it goes. Like if you think of like Instagram or social media, and it's just like all this fake photoshopped people, you know what I mean? And then there's like an Andrew Tate style caricature of a guy, or there's like a woman who looks beautiful, but most of it's Photoshop and most of it is freaking plastic surgery and whatever the heck else they're doing. And people are looking for hyper real humans that don't exist in the real world. And so that makes them not able to settle for someone. And you know, if you're watching Manosphere stuff, you see that clearly from the guy side looking at what women's ridiculous expectations. But I'm sure it exists on the other side too of what men also, you know, want in a woman in some respect. So the concept of the hyperreal applied to dating is interesting. Maybe I'll react to that stream or to that lecture, but you guys will like it. It's interesting.
Expectations. I think a lot of it is just unwillingness to be honest with themselves and with others about what people really desire and the type of arrangement that they would
And what they
like to
desire
have.
at particular times in their lives.
That's true.
Yeah, and that relationship actually being fair and balanced. You know, it's like, okay, they got divorced and he cheated on her. Well, then he deserves to get reamed in court because he cheated on her. Why would he do that to his wife? But then she cheats on him and he's the provider, and nothing happens to her. She still gets everything. Like that's a very obvious problem. But a tradcon will say, well, why did he cheat? But he deserves that. Forget, you know, he wasn't being a good enough husband. We don't want to make divorce laws easier because that's just going to facilitate divorce. That's going backwards. Even though they can't go backwards into patriarchy, and they know that, but they won't admit it. Christian Hernandez says, the problem with hyperreal is that you start to believe falsehoods made up by others. Jordan Peterson is a lunatic because of this. He believes in fairy tales. Hyperreal is a very interesting concept. If you check out that lecture, I think you'll like it. It's a pretty good summary of how it affects things. But social media and TV and how all that stuff works has essentially is what's needed to even create this concept of the hyperreal in itself. But it's only gotten so much crazier, especially with cell phones and all this stuff. And it's affected the way we interact with each other.
So when I was just on Adam Sosnick's show out in the Value.
I mean, like you'll really question things. Like at one point in the lecture, he's talking about how like war is supposed to be like the most real thing, no matter what, you know, and how the hyperreal affects war because we're all seeing it from our televisions, or in this case, our cell phones, and they treat it like a sports game. You know, you could see this with Ukraine. You know what I mean? Like this many Russians were defeated on the battlefield. The number is really high, but the only, you know, this many Ukrainian lives, or it's not even real. Like makes me think like we don't even really know what's happening on the ground. Like maybe what they're telling us is really just part of a spectacle that has nothing to do with reality.
Out in Fort Lauderdale, and he was going around the panel of girls. It was myself and Mike Sartain, another guy was on there, and he was going around the panel of girls talking about like, do you plan to get married at some point? And he's running, you know, each one of them saying, yeah, maybe I want kids, blah, blah, blah. He gets up to the girl who's 23 years old. She goes,
I wasn't sure if he said Michael Knowles or who he was talking about. Sounds like a whatever podcast.
I'm not thinking about marriage or kids or anything like that. And I go, see, and he starts like laying into her. Well, aren't you thinking about your future? You know, maybe now's the time to think about this, and trying to like, you know, wag fingers and scold her a little bit. I go, Adam, stop. I stopped the show right there. I said, don't go any further because she's a really good example of exactly what's going on. A 23-year-old woman is at the peak of her sexual market value. That's not even an afterthought for her because that's her.
Dude, I was having this thought the other day because I was thinking about, I was watching Legion of Men, you know, and he's in Romania now, and I think he's got a girlfriend. It looks like he might even get married soon. But, you know, a few episodes, but in one he was talking about like him in college and how he slept with all these women, and at a certain point it just becomes the same pickup lines, the same everything. He's mentioned this multiple times on his channel. And it makes me think that like just the way like men and women are no different when they have options. Like when a woman has options at 23, she's going to want to exercise all of them until the last minute to cash out. Then they're going to go for the buzzer beater, you know, finding the beta bucks provider or whatever. And I started thinking, are men actually that different? So when a man becomes quote unquote high value or whatever, and he has a ton of options, especially if you didn't have those options when you were younger, I don't think that high value guy just suddenly is like, you know what, I'm going to go get married now and have kids. Obviously not because of the laws, but I think they have the same thing where it's like they're going to want to exercise all the options for as long as possible until they have some sort of moment where it just, like Bo says, it becomes the same pickup lines over. you get nothing from it. It becomes kind of meaningless, which is kind of the same stuff that women complain about at age 27, with the same sort of thing becoming meaningless. But when they're 23, they're not even thinking about marriage, kind of like what he's mentioning now. But the men then go through the same thing later on. That's, I don't know, it's something I was just thinking about, how both men and women want to be able to have as much power with options as they can, and then right at the last minute go for a buzzer beater kind of thing.
Time to be as sexually selective as she wants to. She has the world is her oyster. When the men want to fly her out, she's not thinking about that. But
and then on the other side, the high value man, the world is his oyster. Everybody wants to be with him. You know what I mean? The women are just making it easy. Maybe he's not even thinking about that at that point. Why? Maybe wait till you get your first gray hair or something. Wait till, God forbid, your parents pass, and then you start thinking about it. Or until you have a brush with mortality, you got in a close accident or something, or, God knows, right?
Gets to be 28 years old, she probably will start thinking about that, because now we got to find a guy before the lights at the club come on, and we got to find somebody who's going to be a good, we're going to settle for this guy at 30, the average age of first marriage. But women of that age during that time, they're not looking for the same thing that they're going to be looking for once they get to be a little bit older. And we wonder why. Well, how come you won't do that? Well, the reason why they don't want to sacrifice that peak agency that they have at that time in their life is because first of all, they enjoy it. So we just start with that. But they're not. It's not even an afterthought for them to think that far ahead, because they've been taught that they need to go and get theirs when they can get it. Because for women, their peak of their agency is going to be like probably around 23, 24 years old. And then when men, that's why I keep saying men need to understand that their peak agency is probably going to be around 36, 37 years old. Right? Now, I'm not saying those two should get together. I'm just saying that's when those peaks are, when a guy's hitting his stride. That's when that's going to happen. But the difference is that we're different people at different ages, or we have different priorities when it comes to marriage at 23 than we would at 33 years old, because the chips are down, and we better like I said, grab a guy before the lights come on at the end of the night. But that's again more fallout from the data age, from seeing her girlfriends on Instagram doing those, living vicariously through her girlfriends or her sister or whatever like that, seeing that. Those are things that we didn't think of back in the day. Like the quote that I got from you was, human beings were not, I'm paraphrasing here, we're not designed, didn't evolve to have this global communication that we have today, or something very, very close to that. And that's what's kind of like screwing us up.
Like I said,
I think
that's the increase in options. There's just more options, more ability to have fun, more temptation to leave the marriage.
Running the biggest human experiment in history.
And we don't even realize that we're doing it right now. So everything that we just mentioned when it comes to response,
there's the technology. You got the X factor in the technology. The cell phones aren't going away, and it's just like going back to a patriarchy, whatever they're talking about. It's like, how's that supposed to happen with this?
Ability when it comes to marriage, when it comes to all these things, as far as like the 20th century ideals for those things, and putting them into the 21st century, it comes back to the communication thing right there. Is we've never had this kind of access and this kind of global communication. Like in any other era, I would never know you, because we wouldn't have these cameras, we wouldn't have the internet or anything. I lived in a time before the internet, and I lived in a time after the internet. And once Gen X is gone, maybe some of the.
There's a Rick and Morty episode for this. Man, I haven't watched Rick and Morty in a long time. I don't know which episode you're talking about, but it makes me think of that episode where Rick has a relationship with like a planet, basically, or someone named Unity, and like the whole planet's the same identity, and they all just like him. That's a good show. Man, did the voice actor, didn't he get in some trouble or something, and they fired him? I hope they brought him back. I think after that whole fiasco, I stopped watching.
Once we're gone, that's going to be the last generation that lived prior to that invention that was the internet. And that's why it's weird to me. I think I'm kind of in a unique position here to see how things were before and to see how things are right now.
Yeah, and I'm in the last generation where we're going to be able to see that. I'm 37. And, people who are 7 years younger than myself or so, or younger, they're not they don't have much recollection of
No, there's a dating app episode. Oh man, I gotta find that. That sounds like a good episode.
the world pre-internet, pre-smartphone, pre-social media. So you wouldn't think there's a gigantic gap between, say, a 37-year-old and a 27-year-old, but because of the technology, the way they've grown up and what they've experienced during school, during university, all of that as young adults, it's actually very different to how things were for me. Because when the smartphone, social media revolution all kicked in, I was already in my early 20s. And so you've got that kind of half your life before it and half your life after. What I was going to say is I think actually we've talked about the internet and the social media and that factor. I think that's I think it's a significant factor, but I think more so when we're looking at just kind of like average normal people, so not the type of girls who are going to be going on some of these
Okay, so that's interesting. I'm actually kind of interested in this section. It says life and liberty today. Let's see what they got to say about freedom. I'm actually willing to listen to the rest of that.
Podcasts or doing the street interviews and all up in the club, that type, is I think a lot of it is just economic and education driven as well. Because again, coming back to the egalitarian thing, maybe I'll
Yeah, I mean, you know, how is it the man's supposed to be the head of the household when it takes two decent incomes to afford a house? This whole stay-at-home mom thing is just mostly something of the past, or you're gonna really be trying to save every penny to make that happen. We are prehistoric creatures living with medieval institutions using godlike technology. How do you think that ends? Man, I swear I've seen that quote before, and I can't remember where it comes from, but that's a great quote. I feel like we just kind of have this issue where it's like we're in that situation, and the only thing that can maybe possibly fix that is literally more technology. Or maybe this is where like philosophy comes in. You know, this is where like the software updates are needed. Like we need new philosophers, and dare I say, new religious, let's just say, adjustments to catch up people's mind and spirituality to match this level of technology. The technology is just moving so fast. So people are struggling with that. James Sexton. Did I? Oh, that was James. Yeah. Okay. That's James Sexton.
Share one of my radical ideas here. I think it's stupid that society just expects men and women to.
There was man, you know what? Maybe we should watch that. I saw there was a recent interview on Soft White Underbelly, but it was a discussion between James Sexton and Orion Taraban from Psychax. I like Orion Taraban. I think he's probably like the sharpest creator. I mean, Coach Greg Adams was like my favorite, but Orion Taraban is like a guy who can present red pill talking points and not like he does a lot of justice to it by not looking like, it's completely professional. It's very sharp, very well researched. So I haven't watched that conversation yet, but I bet you it's pretty good. So I might do that soon. Yeah, shout out to James Sexton. He answered one of my questions once, and I did a video on that. I asked him about no-fault divorce.
Run on the same timeline.
Yeah.
It's dumb. And it comes back to this egalitarian idea that we're just biologically identical and intellectually identical and all this stuff. And like, this is going to sound radical to some people because they're so fixed in just the way the status quo. But I think a lot of young women should seriously consider getting married and starting a family before pursuing higher education and pursuing employment and so on. Running on the same timeline as men is like, all right, I'm going to spend my 20s getting as much education as I can and then settling into my career and so on. And then I'll get into my 30s and I'll start thinking about marriage and family. Like I've had conversations with girls who are, let me not say girls, women, young women in their early 20s, and their life plan, their strategy is to get to 30 plus, sometimes I've heard them say even like 35, and then they'll start thinking about finding a guy to settle down with, starting a family, and so on. And
I feel like now with IVF, I mean, they probably have a lot more confidence in doing something like that, so it makes them more willing to do it. Remember when like Bay Area tech companies were offering that to employees, but that, you can do that 3 or 4 times and still have it not take, and then you're down, $40,000 or something like that. Mr. Pitt says, James Sexton said that during his appearance on Soft White Underbelly. Oh, but he was referring to something that was said by Edward O. Wilson, a biologist. Okay, guys, that's where the quote comes from.
My typical answer is, can I be just frankly honest with you? Just honest with you. I have no dog in this fight. Can I just be real with you? And that's a terrible idea. I think that's a horrible idea. If you were a 20-year-old man telling me this, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough. You know, I might say that maybe I think it's a little too rigid. You know what? If you're 28 and you find the amazing girl, whatever, like, cool, like, go get married. Why wouldn't you? But I'm like, you are setting yourself up.
You know, on the other side, the woman's going to say, well, you know, he says it's a terrible idea to me, but they think it's a terrible idea because they don't want to forego having an education and being able to make money to take care of themselves in case a man who, in their words, ain't shit, you know, leaves them high and dry or something like that. And then the fact is there's not enough people out here that make enough money to be able to pay for everything to where if she does get left high and dry, then the divorce laws take over. But if she's pairing with someone that's also young and, you know, I don't know, maybe just a normal guy, then she's probably still feels like she's going to get shortchanged, even if she gets whatever half of the wealth that guy has, because she just considers it's not enough. So they're going to be like, well, we still got to get our education.
It's likely for failure and disappointment if you choose to do that, because our fertility windows are...
There's so many like older women that tell these young women that like, oh, you know, definitely don't get married early. And they're hearing a whole other reality tunnel from their side. IVF is a racket. All these women thinking it's going to be their ace in the hole to allow them to crank out an entire family after 35 are downright brainwashed. They absolutely are, man. I follow this subreddit called Single Mothers by Choice. It is the wildest thing I've seen, man, but it's just full of women. If there were ever a female incel, this is what a female incel is. Like, if an incel is a guy who can't get a woman to lay with him, a female incel is a woman that can't get a man to start a family with her or be in a relationship with her. And they go and they just find a donor and they IVF themselves. But the thing about this subreddit is you'll see all these posts and women are like, I've done it. This is my third time doing it. I'm 42 or I'm 37 and none of them worked. And what's interesting is I found out that it's easier to have IVF be successful with a male embryo than a female embryo. And most of the women are trying to have daughters because I guess that's just what they can identify with. They want to be impregnated with a girl, you know? But for some reason, the girl embryos don't do as well with IVF as the male embryo. So some of them just give up and they're like, okay, you know, I'm going to try to have a son for this round. It's really the wildest thing.
Not the same. There is just a biological reality. Forget everything else. There's just a biological reality at play here where you're telling me you want to get married, you want to have children, you want to do all these things, and your plan is to wait until your mid-30s to then start looking for a guy.
At this point, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they could convince the woman to have the kids young. That's fine. Some guys would probably take the deal, but then on the other end, there's the marriage laws, and it's going to be harder for men to at least want to get married to them. Maybe have kids out of wedlock and just deal with child support if it goes south. But the economy is just not set up for a lot of that. You know what I mean? I mean, maybe when the kids are older, if they can kind of be there without themselves, and the woman could try to get education, but they just don't want to give that up because they don't want to feel like they're dependent on a man.
Out there who have done that and they've managed to have it all. Yes, that does exist. I know some of them. Probability wise, it's just not a good plan. And I think people are so uncomfortable to say that because you know, people will be, oh, well, my sister, you know, my sister just got married at 38 and, you know, she just got...
Yeah, what about? You know, this whataboutism is what it is. What about this? What happens if this happens? I get this from, like, obviously I deal mostly with guys, but like when I'm dealing with women, and I do have a few of them, they'll come to me and they'll say, well, Rollo, where are all the good guys? Where are the nice guys? You've heard this a million times, right? And I go, well, they're back in your 20s where you left them, basically, is where they are. But these are the women who have followed this life plan of, okay, like counter to what you were just saying, is they follow this life plan of, okay, I have to go to college. I have to get a degree in communications. I have to get a degree in, you know, human resources or psychology or whatever, you know, whatever the soft sciences are, or gender studies. And now I've got this. I've done either 4 or 8 years of college. Great. Now I'm an educated individual. Now I'm making some money, whether I'm working in the private sector or I put together the business or something like that. So I got my money. I got the bag. I got the education. I'm basically what women are doing is they're following the life plan of men in the 20th century because they thought that that's what empowered men.
Yes.
Well, women weren't allowed in colleges. Okay. Well, now you're allowed. Okay. But here's the thing: is that's not what empowered men. Going to college isn't what empowered them. It was the fact that they were men and they were doing things. It was the act of doing stuff, right? It wasn't the fact that they all went to college, they all went to this, following that plan is not a guarantee of success. But what they've done is and this is not a Rollo Tomassi quote, this is a Gloria Steinem quote, which is they've become the men that they wanted to marry. And so when they get to be 32, 33 years old and they go, Rollo, how come I can't find a quality guy? These guys ain't worth anything, right? And I'll go, well, here's the problem is like you need to, and we've come full circle. Like in the 70s, we told guys, you need to get in touch with your feminine side. You need to express your emotions. You need to feel more, right? That kind of stuff. You need to get in touch with your inner femininity, right? As if there's some sort of Jungian balance between male and female, right? Now we've come full circle. So what I tell them, I say, you need to get in touch with your inner femininity because you're a man. You're basically have become the men that you wanted to marry. And heterosexual guys don't want to marry another dude, right? And so what you've done is you thought that the path to empowerment was a masculine path of empowerment. So when women tell me, I'm an alpha female, I'm like, no, there's no such thing as an alpha female. There's alpha males. You are an alpha male with female body parts. You know, whatever. It's a family show. But that's basically you followed a masculine life.
I'm just gonna skip it to life and liberty because I'm trying to save time just so we can look at that Whisper, the intro to that Whisper interview. I know we're kind of going over. So let me just get that. See if I can queue up the Whisper interview also at the same time.
Guess what? I have to suffer the consequences of my actions, with good or bad. You have to do the same.
Yeah.
So if you want the right to vote, and if you want to be able to go to college, you own your own business and do all this great stuff, which I believe you should be able to do. All I expect you to do is bear the consequences like any guy would have to do themselves.
The point I was going to make is I think that what's hard is there are women who even outright recognize like. You know, they think feminism was a scam. They're like, but now the way the economy is and the wages and the job market and all these things, they're like, their choices have actually been decreased.
Yeah.
So in the expansion of choice over these last, let's say, 60 or 70 years, what's happened is for the women who are like, hey, actually, I kind of want to be a wife and a mother and I don't want to pursue all of this other stuff. It's now way more difficult for them to do it, just like it's more difficult for a man who wants to do that. You've got guys out there, particularly more religious guys who are, you know, they're under 25. You know, they want to be married by 25.
I think most young men, religious or otherwise, when they're in their 20 to 25-year-old demographic right there, if they found a girl who was hot enough and wanted to get married, they would jump at the chance. They wouldn't care how young or they were, because they see a woman at the peak of her femininity and her powerfulmos. I mean, you want to know why like incels get like really frustrated with women, especially the ones on like our show or whatever. It's because they're powerful. I mean, look at them. They have they're there's the chicks that they want to rub one out to and on a porn site or something like that, because it's really an appearance and a position of power.
Been having this like idea recently that I kind of can't stop thinking about, and it's about how I think essentially what's happened in our society is that adolescence has been extended, or there's even kind of two adolescences now. There's an adolescence 1.0, which is what we all know as adolescence, let's say from 12 to 18. But I think there's a kind of quasi-adolescence 2.0 now, and it might be something that can help people kind of get through like what is essentially a tough time in their 20s, at least for a lot of us guys, most of us. And like just for myself personally, I didn't really feel like life started getting better for me until I hit 30. I don't know why. It just feels that way. And 20 was kind of the same way. Or you see that stat where it's like 30, I can't remember how many percent of 18 to 29-year-olds have never had sex, or it just takes this long to get your life going and try to get a job that makes sense. There's just this extension in adolescence that I think is going to be normal in our society going forward. And it's like we can stigmatize that, or we can just accept that for what it is. And it would at least not put this unnecessary pressure on people. But it seems like the way our economy is, it's just that way now. Trevor says, I sympathize with women. I wasted years of my early 20s in university figuring out life. Only started to figure out career prospects at 24. Couldn't imagine those 20s being the most important SMV years. Yeah, and just saying like wasting those years. I don't even know if it's you wasting the years. It's just that these pathways aren't as clear for us as they were for, generations prior to us, where you got a job at, some local place and you were there for 25 years or whatever and got a pension. So I don't even know if you can call it a waste, but really that's just your kind of an adolescence 2.0 for you if you just trying to figure it out and it takes time. Women are trying to do the exact same thing as far as, career or whatever, except for them, there's that fertility window that they just can't escape. So I don't know. Like, I don't know how you would convince them to do that. Maybe if you're just like, well, have kids now. If you have 3 kids, maybe you get some kind of scholarship to college, or you qualify for some sort of grant that will help you in college later on. I mean, that's the incentive a society can give for them to, have a few kids with somebody. And then there's a grant there later on. They still got to figure out what divorce looks like, because you got to incentivize the man into it too. But if they do want the birth rate to go up like that, they have to come to terms and negotiate with women somehow. Because I don't think, even facing this, I don't even think women, they could know this. You could tell them this explicitly. I still don't think it would bring them back in. They'll be like, oh my God, you're right.
Is what it is. But if you got a guy who's like 20, 25 years old and he's got a girlfriend who's about the same age as he is and she's into getting married, they will probably jump at the chance to get married. Because they don't know any better.
I'll be honest, and I think they should. I think there's actually, I actually think that people who find their like a great potential spouse when they're really young are actually super blessed and fortunate. Because
I mean, I can even agree with that. I feel like you're a lucky, blessed person if you find someone who's a good spouse and a profession that you're gonna want to do or love doing. Like, those are the 2 most amazing things, especially a man could get in his life.
They just avoid all of this garbage.
Like, I would add one caveat to that: if they make it work,
when they make it work, when they make it work, and they statistically,
if it doesn't work, then it's worse than if you didn't find anybody at all.
Well, if they're religious, there's
statistically
a high
like the younger the marriage, the more likely it is to fail.
Is that true of religious couples?
It depends on the religion.
Okay.
Do you know which religion actually has the best track record for marriage? It's not Christianity. It's not Christianity.
No, let me guess.
Maybe like Hinduism or something from India, arranged marriages.
Hindu.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Because there's more.
Hindu.
Yeah, it's a law of averages basically. But yeah, if you are Hindu, you're probably more
in
likely.
India the divorce rate's under 2%.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I love throwing that one out.
Yeah, and why is that? I mean, I think they're still doing dowries over there in marriage transactions. So coming from the family.
So like, what do you mean?
Feminism is starting to rise in India pretty heavily, and it's almost just a natural byproduct of industrialization. As soon as that happens, it just becomes, it just starts to come. Even in countries in the Middle East, I was looking at divorce rates in the Middle East. I wanted to do a video on it, but there's a lot of countries in the Middle East where the divorce rate is around 35%. And, there's feminist things kind of taking hold there. And a lot of it's just industrialization. You know what I mean? So they want to work and they don't want to have to depend on a man. That's frankly how they feel. That's what they're saying. That's what they're telling us. So it just seems to be a byproduct of that. Mr. Pitt says, I'd be in favor of grants and scholarships for women that have already raised their kids. Yeah. Or I mean, you get them to a certain place. I mean, at a certain age or whatever, they hit high school or something, then yeah, sure. I mean, maybe they can do that. They just got to be creative with it. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that they just, it's almost like a guy getting a GI Bill. You know what I mean? Or any soldier. It could be a woman too. I had a buddy who was in Iraq. I mean, after high school, he went, and I remember when he came back and we were hanging out, and, he got the GI Bill and he did college after that. It's not a worse deal. And I have having kids on parity with kind of military service for men. That's how I tend to think about it. And that's kind of where women kind of get, a lot of honor from that, bringing kids. It's something to respect. I almost imagine like the male equivalent of that sort of relief feeling. Maybe it's like if you're drafted and you survive and you come back, it's like, okay, I did my thing for society. Kids or no kids, you know what I mean? And for women, it's just kids are, they did that, it could be dangerous. But the difference is men for draft, we don't have a choice, but women do have a choice to get pregnant or not, and they have many fail-safes in that situation. Lots of simps are married young, unfortunately, so they don't know to the degree they're manipulated. Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, I think I've seen this on Psych Hacks, but he'll look at the SMV chart, and it's like right where it begins to cross, where a man's going up and a woman's on her way down, tends to be where, I guess, that's where our average age of marriage really is. I mean, it's at about 30, 31, 29. So that is right where it crosses. And then, people start negotiating. Really, when I think of marriage, it's a negotiation. And men are forgetting to negotiate and what they should at least be expecting with marriage, Barbarossa talked about this. What makes the divorce rate go high is a good economy and the ability to divorce, not feminism. It's just business at the end of the day. Yeah, it's a negotiation. It's a contract. And it's like the way our economy is, I mean, there's so many possible jobs that a woman can work that, pay enough. The economy is having some issues now, but that is a manifestation of our technology. You know what I mean? And in the dowry video that I did, you can see there's a clear evolution of how marriage happens throughout history, and it's entirely dependent on how the economy is structured. In the beginning, like with early agriculture, where people are using light tools and the women contribute to agriculture, you see bride price being paid. So men pay a bride price and they marry multiple women. Is the ancient Hebrew Israelites were doing it, Mesopotamians, Egyptians, a lot of near, different cultures. And then when the plow was invented, the plow can produce so much more crops at a much more efficient way. There's a surplus of calories. The economy's better. And it typically takes a man to work that. A woman couldn't really do it. So it leads to urbanization. It leads to stratification in incomes and wealth. And then it changes from bride price to dowry. So now the woman's family is paying the man to marry her for a lifetime commitment. Polygyny then goes away in those same cultures I mentioned. And you see that change. So now, I mean, our economy is different now. And it's like women have these other opportunities to work these different jobs and make money. And the laws are 50-50. The truth is, the only thing that makes sense is to make it, I guess, fair. It's like men and women need to bring the same amount of wealth into a marriage. And if one's bringing more wealth, throughout the history of mankind, there's always been a payment made at the time of marriage, which accommodates this deal because one person's bringing more. So they have to compensate for that. That's the marriage transaction. But we lost the marriage transaction in favor of chivalry and love and all these kinds of things. And, we have to figure out a contract that makes sense for the way money moves in our economy. It really is true. Barbarossa is a great channel. I'm glad you told me about him because I've been listening to his stuff and I really like it. Yo, Shadrach, I think this is the first time I saw you in here today. Great to see you, man. Never sign a contract with somebody incentivized to break it. Yeah, exactly. Where there's no consequence to that at all. So they really need to rethink that at all. And if men and women just aren't going to get married for lifetime monogamy, and it's going to be either serial monogamy or who knows what else, people are doing all kinds of things these days. They need to figure out how to accommodate these changes and make it at least fair. You can't sit here and make a guy have to pay for a kid that isn't his and slave his labors away when he does not want to do that. That's how you get MGTOW. Just a couple more seconds of this, and I'll see if I can pull up that red pill.
You pray for 7 minutes a day. I was thinking it was Tim Gordon said.
Appreciate you guys hanging out for so long. It's been fun for me.
Yeah, pray for 7 minutes a day. I don't think that the Hindus are actually doing that.
Yeah. So Rollo, man, what's next for you, man?
All right. Yep. So that's the change in that conversation. Let's look at the comments real quick. This video got I'll give it a like button just to try to help. It gave us some good entertainment. It's got a lot of subs, but it's a little low on views. But there's some comments. Men not getting married is a big signal for society that they have had enough. I don't blame them for opting out. MGTOW really is the only thing having an effect here, truly. I'm encouraging my son to have a prenuptial agreement with his fiance detailing finances and 50-50 children custody. If she refuses, then don't get married. Absolutely. Hey, again, is this the answer? Well, sometimes they get thrown out, but at least they're thinking about it. This is the James Sexton route right here. I tend to it's just, marriage has this kind of symbolism to it that makes sense, but the contract doesn't give that symbolism. It's like the ceremony does. Your family's being there and everybody agreeing to this is what gives that symbolism. So you don't need that marriage contract. But the fact is that society has created so many external legal structures that are outside of the marriage contract that give men all the rights that they traditionally got from marriage. Marriage was good for men in the past because it gave you paternal authority over the kids that your wife issued or gave birth to, because there was no genetic test back then. So it's like having a marriage contract was good because you have rights over your children. But nowadays you don't need that, because as soon as the kid is born, if you're in the hospital, you can sign what's called the paternity declaration. In fact, they will give it to you if they hear you're not this person's husband. Signing the paternity declaration gets filed at the state, and you have literally all the same rights the man who's married does. Except in this case, you have a choice, because if you have some doubt, then don't sign it. You know what I mean? And if she's like, screw you, I want you out of my life, I'm having this baby and I'm going to hide this kid from you, you can walk into a child support agency and say, hey, can you open a case against me for paternity? And they will contact her and they will send it to court, and the judge will order a genetic test to get you paternity rights. So if you're signing a marriage contract because you think it's going to do anything to get you paternal rights, it's a complete waste of time. Custody court exists outside of the marriage contract, and it's not like being married or just being a guy who lived in a house with a woman with the kid gives you any more or less custody rights. The judge is going to look at it the same way. Were you in the kid's life or not? You know what I mean? So marriage does nothing for the guy except force you to over leverage your stuff. So there's really no point, which to me then negates the prenuptial agreement, because it's just like, well, I guess you get a tax break if you sign it, the marriage contract. But for most people, that's not even worth it. Mr. Pitt says, economics also play a major role in family structure. Agrarian societies befitted extended family. Industrialized societies benefited nuclear families. Yes, exactly. The digital age now benefits the individual. That is very, very true. And the nuclear family, it was really more about extended clans. Like there is an extended family unit and you guys own land. And that's why marriages are so important, because what they're trying to figure out is how to thread who inherits the land. And if your marriages aren't done right, suddenly some people that you don't know that well now own half of your property. And this is just going to dissolve everything. You know what I mean? So you have to be very specific about that and how they did that. And that's where you see things like cousin marriage or marriages that are within the tribe in that way, because they're worried about what happens to that land. And you can also look at like the impact of the church, because it used to be clans, but as the church expanded, they go into places in like Germania, Ireland, all these other places where all these styles of marriage are very common, but they go in there and they change the rules. And that leads to the creation of a very European style nuclear family, where it's the man and the woman in the household with the kids, and the extended family plays a lesser role. But the way that worked was the church was there, and that's what united all these individual nuclear families. So the clan structure was moved in favor of that, and it still worked because the church joined all these people. Nowadays, the church kind of takes a backseat. It doesn't have the same political power that it did, and since that's not really there, that network of individual families, it's very hard to keep them together in a community way, in the same way that the church used to do it. So yeah, I mean, when you say like the digital age and the benefits of the individual, it makes me think of like a gig economy. It's like we have these gig relationships, and I'll have a series of a bunch of gig relationships in my life. Like I'm an Uber guy or something, and some of them will have kids from them and some of them won't. And it seems like that's the future we're facing, The The ceremony is a sham too because it's supposed to be a vow to your community, but the community doesn't hold women accountable, so there's no longer a point either. That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, you know, I do believe in the symbolism of it, you know, because it has this thing, and there's supposed to be this thing where everybody is like, okay, yeah, these two are an item. Don't act like you didn't know. You know, if she gets pregnant, you know what I mean, and it's by him, let's not all act surprised. And it's supposed to at least have this intention about it. Let's see what the other comments say, and then I'll see if I can find the other video. Not everybody is fit for marriage. Is clear, but marriage is certainly one of the best things you can do if you are reasonably healthy in all senses. Broken people committing to marriage is more often than not a bad idea. You know, I can get behind that. The marriage laws need to change and catch up to modern times. Yes, it's a raw deal for men. Thank you. Have been looking forward to the chat for a while. Zuby, you're the only conservative Christian I really know with a prominent name that doesn't strawman RP beliefs. Great discussion. Yeah, we can give him that. Would love to hear more from you on these topics in the future. We'll go one more comment. I believe this conversation is far easier than people make it out to be. Similar with dating. Should you marry? Maybe. Is she a woman who displays the behaviors of a wife? I hate to be pessimistic, but in 2024, it'd be a real challenge to find a woman who displays these types of behaviors because they're not the same women anymore. It's different. And if they display it, maybe they just do it for a certain amount of time. Oh, damn. Is that channel gone? Whisper interview. I can't remember the name of that guy's channel. Damn. Unless they got rid of the channel, that would suck. Oh, man. RP University? Maybe that was his channel name. Oh, that's sad. Looks like I'm not going to find it. I'll have to show it to you guys on another stream. I don't want to hold that up. Red Pill University. I can't remember the name of his channel. That's too bad. Sorry, guys. I wanted to show you that. Red Pill University. I'm trying to think. Nah. Yeah, if I find it later, I'll just have to show it to you guys in another stream. But you know, I don't think it was a bad conversation. I don't really know if they thought of anything new. We did skip some parts, so I gotta give them that. But yeah, I mean, again, you know, I think the part of the red pill that emphasizes a lot of traditional masculinity, or at least maybe advocates for going back to that, or that it should be this way because of female nature and stuff like that. Like, okay, I get that, but at the same time, technology exploits our nature in a different way, and it opens up new horizons of behavior that we didn't have before because they were too costly. So nature is one thing, and I do agree there are biological realities there, but if the way we live is vastly different, then we have to think of unique ways to live that match the way our economy goes. Man, I'm just so sad that I can't find that interview. I really wanted to show it to you, but it's all right. University. Interview. It's just not going to happen. Nah. Yeah, God, there's just a bunch of other stuff happening. But I appreciate everyone who was in today, and I appreciate all the folks who donated and support the channel, and anybody who is here, left comments, and was active, and hit the like button. Our poll ended at 69%. It's kind of funny. End poll. So looks like 69% of you will not respect the preferred pronoun under any circumstances. 30% said yes. 13 votes. Trevor said, it is said that you can guess what someone's watch history is like by seeing the recommendation feed. Was there anything embarrassing in there? Let me see. I spent, let's see what we got. You know, if it was up to me, I would take this off, but I don't even know how to do that. Gobekli Tepe, spend a day with the dangerous gang. Some random channel that's looking at Hasanabi, Legion of Men. I guess there's nothing too bad in there. Some random movie. You know what's funny? Sometimes when I watch people reactions, I do look at the recommendation feed because I feel like it does reveal some stuff. Thanks, JP. I appreciate that. Man, I might do a stream reacting to that Jean Baudrillard interview with Rick Roderick. You guys should really check out. I'll pull it up just again for you guys. You guys should really check out his channel. He has a whole thing. He goes over Nietzsche. He has a series called The Self Under Siege.
Upset.
And I don't know, he's cool. You know, he's like just this guy from Texas, and he just makes philosophy fun. But I might even do a live reaction to this. I just want to warn you guys now because I know, you know, we usually talk about this stuff. I will probably still tie it in to this stuff. But I don't know. Can I make this interesting, stream into it? We'll see. I'm also kind of getting the urge to stream some video games. There's this new Chinese game that came out, something Wukong, or you play as a monkey. But I'll probably just do that on Twitch so I don't torture everybody. Pronouns are for the person doing the observing to decide, not the observed. That definitely seems like the master morality way to live instead of the slave morality or the herd morality. Yeah, I definitely get it. I mean, at a certain point, you know, if you push people too far, and it like I like what Will said earlier. He said that, oh man, that was pretty far up. But he mentioned that I use the right pronoun if their look is on point. Like I can live with that. I can do that. You know what I mean? But if someone very obviously looks like a guy and they're like, I want you to call me this, I will probably just resort to saying this individual. Like this individual is asking for a glass of water, or this individual is working on that. And I will just do that and then probably just limit that. Because at a certain point, they're just asking you to like look stupid and jump through hoops, you know. When it comes to a lot of these issues, I try to think if I had a son or a daughter, like how would I truly feel about this? And it reminds me of the story of a buddy that I grew up with. He's like a family friend, you know. He's a really good guy. He worked at a cement factory for years down here after high school and stuff. And he ended up moving to Texas because the company, this cement factory or whatever it was, sent him there. So he moved away, and he had gone through a divorce, and he had a daughter. And I remember this daughter back when she was a kid, because I remember he'd throw little birthday parties, and I'd go over there and look like, you know, good kid, whatever, normal kid. But then, you know, one day he's living in Texas working. This is after the divorce. Wife wanted a divorce. A few years later, he found out. They didn't even tell him. But one day, you know, they just break the news to him like, oh, you know, she is a boy now, and this is what her new name is and everything. And man, he was heartbroken over that. Like he was messed up over that. You know what I mean? Because it's like nothing, no consideration, nothing. Just this happened one day, and his daughter, you know, that's just what it was. So I don't know, you know. And then when it goes to this conversation about all the responsibility with none of the authority, it used to be you got some authority over your kids. You know, people decided who they're going to get married to. They're going to carry on the family's values. You raise them and all this stuff. But the way we look at freedom is like once they're 18 or whatever, they can do whatever they want. And in some places, as far as these issues go, I mean, they can do whatever they want earlier, and the state will protect them. So then that's another thing to add to the calculus. Is it worth having kids, you know, as far as this? I'd like to think yes. I ultimately would like to think it might be worth just, not even worth it. My thought working at child support was like, well, you know, if maybe someday you just got to walk through the fire. And then if you get screwed, I would like to think a red pill guy, if he goes through it, can handle it a lot better than a guy who doesn't understand this. Because it's not a surprise. It's like, yeah, well, we knew that was going to happen. Holy shit, that kind of sounds like a fever dream. Yeah, man, it totally did. He's a good guy too, man. He's a really good guy. And you know, I don't want to judge people who do that. I'm very like, I don't want to make anybody not feel accepted or anything like that. But in his situation, it's like he had like no input in that at all. You know what I mean? Like he didn't even get to accept that. It was just like they didn't tell him anything. And of course they would demonize him. They'll probably say, oh, he was being a bad dad. You know, he made her feel unsafe. His own daughter, which you would think that is the person that's, if anybody's going to look out for, it's going to be that guy. But Anyways, I'm rambling now. And you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Thank God it's Sunday tomorrow.